Chapter 474. Lily also knew that she couldn't go too far, so she just stared at him for a few seconds. After noticing the shock and fear in his eyes, Lily's red lips curled up, and she gently licked her red lips. She stared at him and then narrowed her eyes. Lily. He couldn't stand it anymore, stood up, and roared. She straightened up and turned her head. It's just a joke. Why are you in such a hurry? Then she sat on Han's lap, took the bottle, and began to spin it. This time, it was Li Xiqing again. This time, Li Xiqing took the dare and threw it to Luo Zhan. Luo Zhan read the words on it. Feed your partner bananas. 10 minutes for one. Fortunately, it was not a restricted level. Su Qianxi breathed a sigh of relief, but, for some reason, Lily burst out laughing. Luo Zhan also laughed very unkindly. Eat bananas for 10 minutes, sister-in-law. Su Qianxi was a bit confused and said, What are you laughing at? Wasn't it just eating a banana? 10 minutes, one banana, 10 minutes. Luo Zhan rubbed his hands and soon went to get a few bananas. Come on. Li Xiqing glanced at him and said, Your sister-in-law is shy. Why don't you let her feed me? No. That would be boring. Lily shouted. Let Qianqian do it. I have not seen Qianqian eat bananas yet. Hearing their words, Su Qianxi suddenly realized and immediately blushed. Li Xiqing slowly took a banana, quickly peeled it, and said, Come on. Su Qianxi blushed and stared at the banana for a long time. The countdown starts, sister-in-law. This one takes 10 minutes. Su Qianxi opened her mouth, put the banana in her mouth, and took a small bite. However, although it was a small bite, it was already 1/10 of the banana. How could she eat it for 10 minutes? Don't stop, continue. Luo Zhan shouted. She chewed, looked up and down, and took another small bite. The smile on Li Xiqing's face grew wider and wider as he whispered, You can take a bigger bite and spit it out if you can't finish it. Hearing that, Su Qianxi immediately understood what he meant and punched him. He opened his mouth and took another small bite. In the blink of an eye, less than 2 minutes had passed, but more than half of the banana was gone. Su Qianxi was a little anxious and said, Aren't you bullying me? You won't let me stop. You want me to keep eating. How can I eat for 10 minutes? Sure, use another way. Luo Zhan chuckled. For example, swallow the rest in one gulp. Su Qianxi's face was red. Seeing the expectant expressions around her, she opened her mouth and slowly swallowed it. Lily looked at the direction of Su Qianxi with interest. Suddenly, she felt Han move under her, and then something quietly rose behind her. Han reached out and pushed her, his voice a little hoarse. Go back. Lily turned her head and looked at him deeply. Just now, she sat on his lap for so long, and he did not have any reaction. Now Su Qianxi just took a bite of the banana, and he actually. Chapter 475. Her voice was very low, and only the two of them could hear it. Han froze slightly, looked up, and knew that she had found out when he saw her expression. His face was burning, but he no longer stood on ceremony and pushed her. Young master, take her back. He raised an eyebrow and looked at her. Lily snorted and walked back in the direction of Ming. Only 5 minutes later, the banana in front of her was almost gone. Su Qianxi squeezed Li Xiqing's hand anxiously. What should we do? Li Xiqing bit off the last piece of banana and put it in his mouth. Su Qianxi's eyes widened, but before she could say anything, he took her in his arms, clasped her head with his big hand, and fed her with his mouth. Su Qianxi looked at him, opened her mouth, and took a bite. He ate the rest, and then put his lips on hers. From a light kiss, he soon wiped out the banana in his mouth. However, he still did not let go, but pressed her on the back of the sofa, his big hand around her waist, no different from usual. Provocative and wild. Luo Zhan, the single man, felt his heart aching and shouted, Hey, that's enough. Rong Rui subconsciously looked at Qingyu. He saw her looking at them, her hands intertwined, and her face blushed. Seeming to notice his gaze, she turned her head to look at him. Seeing his amber eyes, she immediately looked away. Su Qianxi was kissed senseless. When he let her go, she was already panting and lying in front of him. Luo Zhan glanced at the time and was speechless. Just 10 minutes. He took her in his arms and whispered with a smirk, "How do you feel?" Su Qianxi looked up at him and patted him. "There are so many people," he chuckled. "Then we can continue after we go back and close the door." Su Qianxi's face was even redder, and she covered her face. Li Xiqing smiled, stretched out his hand, and turned the bottle again. The mouth of the bottle slowly turned, and finally, it fell on Qingyu, the only one who had not won. She coughed and thought for a moment. Or, dare. Luo Zhan looked at her with sparkling eyes. Special Assistant Cheng, truth has a lot of taboo topics. Let's play dare. You don't have a partner anyway, so don't be afraid. Qingyu originally wanted to choose truth, but after hearing what Luo Zhan said, she felt that it made sense. She reached out and grabbed a handful of dare. Luo Zhan took it excitedly and read the words on it. Choose any member of the opposite sex and kiss them passionately. As soon as he finished thinking, Luo Zhan suddenly felt that his life was bright. Heavens, spring is really coming. Happiness came too suddenly, and he wasn't ready to deal with it. Ah. Wait, be more reserved, be more reserved. Luo Zhan looked at Qingyu with sparkling eyes. Qingyu's lips twitched. Looking at the words on the card, she clenched her fist and mercilessly knocked on his head. Asshole. You tricked me. Luo Zhan held his head and wailed, but soon moved excitedly to her side and said, "No, you should believe that this is the fate that God gave us, right? I am such a handsome man by your side, and God let you choose me. Qingyu, come on, ravage me. I am ready. I am willing." With that, he opened his arms to Qingyu, with a heroic and stirring look on his face, but the smile on his face could not be stopped. Dash. Chapter 476. Qingyu looked at him, twitched her lips, and punched him in the chest. Go away. I'm serious. Luo Zhan wailed. Really, Qingyu? Seeing such a scene in front of him, Rong Rui's eyes were cold. Without saying a word, he reached out and pulled her over. Dumbfounded, Luo Zhan reached out to grab her other hand and said, "What do you want to do?" So direct? Wasn't it too obvious to steal a woman? I should be the one asking you what you want to do. Rong Rui did not intend to back down at all. Looking at Luo Zhan, he said, "Qingyu has been with me for a long time." Luo Zhan was struck by lightning and blurted out, "Aren't you pursuing her?" Although the words were directed at Rong Rui, his eyes were looking at Qingyu. Qingyu's face was cold, and she immediately wanted to get rid of Rong Rui's hand. But how could Rong Rui let go? Instead, he tightened his grip on her hand. Qingyu tried to take back the hand that Luo Zhan was holding, but Luo Zhan was not willing to let go. Qingyu frowned deeply and shouted impatiently, "It hurts. Let go, okay?" Luo Zhan immediately let go of her hand. Seeing the red marks on her hand, he looked apologetic. "Sorry, Qingyu, I didn't mean to." Qingyu looked at Rong Rui with a cold face. Seeing Luo Zhan let go, Rong Rui also let go. Two men fighting for a woman. The scene was a bit intense. Su Qianxi looked at their different expressions and sympathized with Luo Zhan. In fact, Rong Rui had already succeeded. However, were Qingyu and Rong Rui quarreling now? Qingyu picked up the card and looked at it. She smiled and reached out to take the half bottle of whiskey that she had just used to scare people. Everyone was shocked. Yu Lily's eyes widened, and she pressed the bottle and said, "Sister, are you serious?" Really? Luo Zhan was a good man, really a good man. Qingyu knew his character. If she was still the old Qingyu, maybe she would really consider it, but now, she could not go to Rong Roy. That guy wanted her to be with him. In that case, she could no longer get rid of him. Rather than that, she might as well drink this half bottle of wine and let fate take its course. Taking the bottle, she removed the lid and poured it into her mouth. Luo Zhan was frightened and quickly grabbed the bottle from her hand. However, she had already drunk several mouthfuls, and her face was red. Su Qianxi also stood up and said, "Well, it's just a game. Why so serious?" Luo Zhan held the bottle in his hand with a bitter face. He nodded repeatedly and said, "Let's not play anymore. In fact, it's not fun. This game is too wretched. I really don't know who came up with it." Qingyu chuckled and looked at Luo Zhan. "Isn't it your idea? I think you did it on purpose, didn't you?" Seeing her smile, Luo Zhan breathed a sigh of relief. Just as he was about to say something, he heard Rong Roy say, "Who said that? So many people didn't cheat just now. It's your turn to cheat. It's not very good." Hearing that, she turned to look at him. Rong Roy was looking at her with deep eyes. He stretched out his hand, took the bottle from Luo Zhan's hand, raised his head, and gulped it down. Chapter 477. Slamming the empty bottle on the table, Rong Roy's cheeks were slightly red, and he took a breath. His lips were bright red. "I apologize for what happened the day before yesterday." Then he walked toward the door. Qingyu looked at his back and asked, "Where are you going?" There was no response. "I'm going to have a look." Qingyu picked up her bag and chased after him. Luo Zhan felt that his sincere heart had been completely crushed into pieces by Rong Roy's scheming means. Luo Zhan clutched his heart and slumped on the sofa, looking up at the ceiling in despair. He sniffed and said sadly, "Did you hear that?" "What?" Su Qianxi asked cooperatively. "Oh." Luo Zhan wailed, clutching his heart. "The sound of my heart breaking." Rong Roy walked very fast. When Qingyu walked out, he was already gone. She ran all the way to catch up with him. When she saw his back, he had already entered the elevator. She hurriedly pressed the button, and the elevator door was opened again. She gasped slightly, looked at him, and walked in. Rong Roy drank a little too much, and he finished it in one breath. The effect of the alcohol came quickly, and in such a short time, Rong Roy's face had already become red. Walking out of the door of Palace No. 1, the cold wind blew, and Rong Roy's footsteps slightly swayed. Qingyu immediately went to hold him and scolded, "Why are you pretending when you can't drink? Is it interesting?" Rong Roy did not answer. Instead, he held her hand and looked at her with his amber eyes. But soon, he closed them. "My head hurts, nonsense." Qingyu yelled at him and helped him find his car. The alcohol she had just drunk was too strong. At this moment, her footsteps were a little unstable, and her head was dizzy. Rong Roy noticed her strangeness and took her car key. "Don't drive. It's dangerous. Take a taxi." Then, he had reached out and stopped an empty taxi. Rong Roy was sent to the back seat by Qingyu. When she was about to leave, she was pulled in. Qingyu exclaimed, and when she came back to her senses, the door had been closed. Rong Roy told her the address, which was Qingyu's. After paying the fare and getting off, Rong Roy became more dizzy, and so did Qingyu. Seeing the gate of the community where she lived, she was in a trance. Why did she bring Rong Roy over? Strange, let's go. Rong Roy pulled her. His steps were not steady, but he still knew the way. Entering the elevator and finding her door, Rong Roy reached into her bag for the key. She was a little dizzy. After he took out the key, she suddenly felt something was wrong. "You still want to go in?" "I paid rent." Rong Roy chuckled and pushed her in. She was very dizzy. After being pushed by him, she obediently walked back into the room and fell down when she saw the bed. However, she felt a weight on her body and opened her eyes. It was Rong Roy. Rong Roy's face was flushed, but his eyes were clear. She was in a trance. Looking at him, she didn't know how to react and just stared at him blankly. Rong Rui leaned down and kissed her lips from behind. Their bodies fell down and they rolled on the single bed. Being kissed so suddenly, her consciousness suddenly sobered up and she immediately struggled. Chapter 478. After Su Qianxi and the others stopped playing, they went to eat. Luo Zhan was not in a good mood and deliberately quarreled with Lui Han. After a few words, the two of them began to quarrel with each other again. Su Qianxi looked at the two of them speechlessly while eating, picked up a piece of lobster meat, and fed it to Li Xicheng. O Ming saw Su Qianxi's action and glanced at Yu Lily. Yu Lily had just picked up a piece of meat and was about to put it in her mouth. Noticing O Ming's gaze, she immediately turned the chopsticks. Come on, O Ming ate with satisfaction, but saw Luo Zhan had become resentful again, looking at Lui Han. Come on, Lui Han was speechless and slapped him. F***ck off. Luo Zhan was slapped directly on the table and cried, there is no justice. Why can't a handsome man like me find a girlfriend? I finally fell in love with one, but she ran away with someone else. It's so unfair. Lui Han snorted, took a sip from the beer bottle, and said, I don't have a girlfriend either. I am more handsome than you, taller than you, and stronger than you. If you want to be single, I will be ahead of you. How old are you? 22 years old, a good time, and I am already 27. After crying, Luo Zhan suddenly looked up. How about we make do with each other? You can clean up and cook. I don't mind that you are a man. Okay. Lui Han ate the meat with his chopsticks, chewing, and said, one day you can change your personality, and then come back to see if I am blind. What if you are lucky? Damn, my face, this face, do I need plastic surgery? Do I? Luo Zhan pointed to his face and said fiercely. Lui Han held the bottle for a long time before nodding seriously. Very much. Luo Zhan said. I don't want to live, then go to hell. But I have not married yet. Give up. There are not many blind people in this world. Can't you comfort me? Lui Han also realized that his words might have been a bit harsh. He hesitated and said, in fact, there are quite a lot of blind people. Luo Zhan almost flipped the table and left. Su Qianxi and Yu Lily were both laughing. Looking at the two of them, the two women exchanged a look. After the meal, they soon parted ways. Luo Zhan and Lui Han both drank a little too much. After the two guys went home with their wives, the two brothers also hugged each other and stumbled on their way home. Lui Han patted him on the shoulder, his drunken face full of righteousness. We are all in the same boat. I'm having an affair. Lui Han couldn't help but laugh. Have you ever been educated? Tisk, so what if you know ancient poems? I also memorized them when I was in primary school. Seriously, you've lived for 27 years, and you really haven't had a single girlfriend? No, what about F***ck? When Luo Zhan heard these two words, he immediately recovered and shouted, F***ck, that kind of thing, I don't even want to touch that kind of thing. If his mother knew, she would definitely break his legs. Tsk, I really suspect that you are gay. Stay away from me. Then she reached out and pushed him away. Luo Zhan did not let it go and stuck to her again, tiptoeing and forcing himself to put his shoulder. I also suspect that you are gay. You are so handsome, why don't you have a girlfriend? Finally admit that I am more handsome than you? A little bit. Tsk, you haven't answered my question. Well. There is a girl, I have loved her for 8 years. She doesn't like you? No, I have not told her. Lui Han looked into the distance, a bit absent-minded. She is so simple that she is a bit stupid. If I do not tell her, she will not understand. Hey, you think I can't see that you like the wife of your second brother, right? That girl for 8 years is Su Qianxi, right? How do you know? Come on, you are not blind. Whenever you are free at night, you stare at her and ask her first before you do anything. Even a fool can see that. Is that so? I am used to it. It used to be like this. She used to say that I was her best friend. Poor. Luo Zhan looked sympathetic. Why didn't you confess? Maybe if you did, she would have chosen you. Hearing that, Luihan was dazed for a moment and then smiled bitterly. My family is poor, and I wanted to wait until I had my own career before pursuing her. I did not expect that, she got married so soon. Chapter 479. Okay. Okay, I'm home. You can go back. Luo Zhan waved at him, reached into his trouser pocket, and suddenly stopped. Seeing his reaction, Luihan asked, "What's wrong?" Luo Zhan searched several pockets and said with a desperate look, "I don't seem to have the key." Luihan looked at the time, and it was already past 12 o'clock in the morning. It's so late. Can you find a locksmith? There are no hotels nearby. How about staying at my house for a night? Your house? Well, I'll pay you back for taking me in for one night last time. Humph. Let's go. Luo Zhan paced, his movements neither fast nor slow. When he arrived at Luihan's house, Luo Zhan realized that the distance between their houses was very close. It took less than 10 minutes to walk. As soon as he entered the door, Luo Zhan was amazed. From the entrance, there was a shoe cabinet, which was neatly lined with all kinds of beautiful sneakers and leather shoes. Further inside, the white sofa was as clean as new, with a fruit plate and a laptop on the coffee table. The white dining table was covered with an elegant tablecloth, and in the middle of the tablecloth, there was a vase with 2 green roses on it. It was very fresh, with a fresh smell and a fresh environment. On the wall of the living room, there were photo frames. There were Luihan himself, Su Qianxi, his work partners, and Yu Lily when he was in his school uniform. Luo Zhan looked around and went into the kitchen. He found that the whole house was clean and spotless, and all the tableware in the kitchen was upside down on the shelf. Opening the refrigerator, Luo Zhan took a bottle of Coke and drank it directly. When he came out, he shouted exaggeratedly, "God, is this a man's house? You live alone?" "Yes." Luihan glanced at his expression and threw the clothes he took from his house last time at him with contempt. "Do you think it's like your doghouse?" Luo Zhan took it and smelled the fragrance on the clothes. His expression was very complicated. "Compared with yours, mine is really a doghouse." And there was no comparison at all, okay? Luihan raised his eyebrows and said, "I'll clean up a guest room for you. You go take a shower first." "All right." Luo Zhan experienced the pleasure of being a guest, but when he was about to enter the bathroom, his phone suddenly rang with an emergency notification. "Warning, the prey has entered the net. Please retract the net." Luo Zhan raised his eyebrows and muttered to himself, "Finally." Then he shouted, "Luihan, let me use your computer." "Okay, just don't delete my stuff." Luo Zhan got the nod, immediately turned on the computer, and directly entered the trap he had already set for that person. About 10 minutes later, Luo Zhan copied all the information and sent it to Li Siqing before calling him. It was already past 1 a.m., and Li Siqing seemed to have fallen asleep. It was a long time before he was picked up. Luo Zhan said quickly, "Do you remember the last time you asked me to find Tang Zhenghao?" Li Siqing was originally sleepy, but he immediately woke up after hearing what Su Qianxi said. "Found it?" "Yes, he finally used that card. I just captured his location. He's in San Francisco, USA. Since that's the case, let's take away all of his available funds and spread the news." "So fast?" Luo Zhan was surprised. "Yes, she's pregnant. I don't want any more accidents. The sooner the Tang family is dealt with, the sooner I can be at ease." Although the Tang family had fallen, if Tang Zhenghao was left alone, there would be too many variables. Instead of being passive, it was better to take the initiative. Only by striking first could he smoothly control the overall situation, right? Luo Zhan knew him very well, so he nodded and did not say more. Got it. Leave it to me. Thank you. Li Xiqing said the last sentence, hung up the phone, and tiptoed back to the room. Su Qianxi was sleepy. Feeling him, she subconsciously reached out and hugged him. Her breathing was still even and steady. Li Xiqing chuckled and reached out to brush away the stray hair on her forehead. She had already completely gotten used to his presence. How nice. Dash. Chapter 480. Su Qianxi had a good sleep, but it was not enough. It was definitely not a good feeling to be woken up early in the morning. Feeling that his hand was pinching her nose, she frowned and slapped him. However, she was caught firmly and lifted up. She opened her eyes with a pout. After seeing Li Xiqing, her head drooped again. I'm so sleepy. Sleep on the plane. Li Xiqing pulled her up. We're going to the capital today. Did you forget? No. I'm not going. Let's go tomorrow. Then she burrowed into the quilt. Li Xiqing was speechless. You will say the same thing tomorrow. Get up. I'll help you change. She put her arm on him. I will vomit on the plane. You told Rong Haiyue yesterday that you would arrive this afternoon. Are you going to break your promise? Hearing this, she finally straightened up and let him help her take off her clothes. Li Xiqing tapped her nose. You are getting lazier. Although he said so, he still patiently helped her change. From the beginning to the end, she did not even look up. Done. Oh. She immediately opened her eyes, got out of bed, and went to the bathroom. After washing, Li Xiqing had already prepared her bag in a small suitcase with a few pieces of clothing in it. Let's go. Wait for me. I'll put on some makeup. No makeup. Pregnant women should stay away from these things. But I look so pale. Look at my face. She complained. It's pale and yellow. So ugly. Not ugly. You look better than many people with makeup. Really? Really? Then I'll put on some lipstick. However, Li Xiqing walked up and took her lipstick away. Picking her up, he shouted, Let's go. Eat first and then leave. She pouted, but she was not as strong as him, so she had to give up. After breakfast, Li Xiqing took a taxi to the airport. On the plane, Su Qianxi could not fall asleep and called, Honey. The more I think about it, the more I feel that our children might really be twins. Last night, I dreamed that a little boy and a little girl came to play with me. They asked you to name them. Li Xiqing heard her words and turned his head. His face, which had always been cold, seemed to have a smile. I'll take it. Yes. She looked at him expectantly. Grandpa will definitely name them. You can give them pet names. Hearing this, Li Xiqing pondered for a moment. Su Qianxi could not wait any longer and said, How about Li Debao and Li Erbao? Li Xiqing was silent for a second and looked at her. Then, Baby Li Bebe? Su Qianxi changed another one. Isn't that what children usually have? Lie down and let me think about it. Obviously, he did not like the name she had given him. Puffing her cheeks unhappily, she threw the blanket away and turned her back on him. Li Xiqing smiled, leaned on the chair, and thought. It took 3 hours to get from Kingstown to the capital. When they arrived at the Capital International Airport, it was already noon. Chapter 481. Be careful. Li Xiqing held her. Let's go down and talk. Okay. Su Qianxi was taken off the plane by him. After they took their luggage, they took a taxi to the hotel they had booked. The weather in the north was cold, and the surrounding trees were all bare. Looking into the distance, all he could see was a stretch of gray. This was the legendary haze. Su Qianxi looked back and saw that Li Xiqing was actually searching for the children's nicknames. She took a look and said, I thought of another one. Xiao Si, Xiao Cheng. Xiqing? Li Xiqing chuckled, turned off the phone, and said, Xiao Qian, Xiao Ci. Yes, yes. Then Desu, Ursu. No, uncle, it sounds so bad. The driver in the front laughed. Su Qianxi blushed slightly and patted Li Xiqing. Change it. We're here. Let's get out first. We'll talk later. Li Xiqing opened the door and took her out. This was a hotel. Li Xiqing carried their luggage and walked in with Su Qianxi. After the couple booked a suite and had dinner, they went to the home address that Rong Haiyue had given them. The place where Rong Haiyue lived belonged to the capital military area. The hotel they stayed in was the best hotel near where he lived. Su Qianxi and Li Xiqing bought some gifts before walking in that direction. Suddenly, Su Qianxi inadvertently looked back and saw a smooth and soft white BMW driving past. The profile of the driver's seat was extremely familiar. There was a bit of traffic on the road, and the car was driving very slowly. Su Qianxi looked over, and the person in the driver's seat seemed to feel her gaze and looked over. Rong Xian saw that it was her, slightly dazed, but quickly turned back indifferently and rolled up the window, blocking Su Qianxi's view. What's wrong? Li Xiqing saw that she did not leave and whispered. Do you see that woman? Su Qianxi pointed to the BMW. It's Rong Xian. Li Xiqing saw the car, and his eyes suddenly became obscure. He gently pulled her. The Rong family is nearby. Let's go. Rong Haiyue was practicing shooting with his daughter in the backyard. When he received the call, he was pleasantly surprised. Anna, let's go. I'll take you to meet someone. Where to? Rong Anna put down the gun and followed. At the door. I'll bring them in. Rong Haiyue seemed to be in a good mood and walked quickly. Rong Anna hadn't seen Rong Haiyue so happy for a long time. The last time he was in such a good mood was a few years ago when her mother suddenly bought him a scarf. He's here? When Rong Haiyue opened the door, he saw Li Xiqing and Su Qianxi standing not far away, talking. Seeing Rong Haiyue, he took Su Qianxi's hand and walked over to them. Mr. Rong. Su Qianxi called and looked at Rong Anna behind Rong Haiyue. Hello, Miss Rong. When Rong Anna saw Su Qianxi's face, she immediately recognized her. Her eyes were not big, but they were extremely charming. There seemed to be something different. She seemed a little surprised. It's you? Su Qianxi did not know if it was an illusion, but she felt that Rong Anna's eyes were a bit strange. Was it because she looked like Rong Xian? Chapter 482. Come in and sit down, Rong Haiyue greeted them. You just arrived? Yes. Have you eaten? Rong Haiyue took the gift from Li Xiqing. Yes, I just ate in the hotel, Su Qianxi replied. As soon as she was ushered in, she was attracted by the photo on the big cabinet at the door. It was a family photo that had been enlarged. Rong Anna's smile was like a flower, and Rong Haiyue's face had a faint but heartfelt smile of satisfaction. On the far right of them, the expression of the woman seemed a little distant and cold. In this photo, she seemed out of place. That is my wife, Rong Haiyue explained. Doesn't she look a bit like you? Rong Xian, Su Qianxi said. It turns out that the last time she was in Kingstown Hospital, she went to see you. You met her? Yes, when I was in the hospital, I first went to see you that night, and I met her in the hallway. She looked a bit cold. She has always been like this. Rong Anna smiled and served them tea. The nanny went home for the new year. I don't know how to make tea. I hope you don't mind. This is my daughter, Rong Anna. She is 21 years old this year, and should be 1 or 2 years younger than you. She can be considered your sister. Maybe you can become good friends. If she is 21 years old, she is the same age as me. Su Qianxi felt she was old. I am 21 years old, and my birthday is in October. I am not much older than her, right? Rong Haiyue was dazed. Aren't you the daughter of Song Yifan? You should be 22 or 23 years old, right? Rong Xian returned to him 22 years ago. With Su Qianxi's face, he could already tell that she was her daughter. If she was the child of her and Song Yifan, then the child should be at least 22 years old. How could she be 21? How old she is none of your business. A cold voice came in, and the sound of high heels sounded. Do you still want to nibble on young grass at such an old age? The voice was cold and not polite. Vaguely, there was even a bit of contempt. She is the same age as your daughter. Rong Haiyue, you are too crazy. Everyone turned their heads almost at the same time and saw the elegant and gorgeous lady at a glance. Rong Xian was wearing a sapphire blue cashmere coat with a thick ankle-length cheongsam inside. She was wearing high-heeled shoes that were at least 5 centimeters high, looking elegant and noble. Rong Xian. Rong Haiyue shouted. He already had a terrible guess in his heart. Could it be, you can go back? Rong Xian looked at Li Xicheng and Su Qianxi. We need to deal with our family affairs. It is not convenient for outsiders to be present, so we will not see you out. Su Qianxi looked at her and couldn't help comparing her with the Rong Xian in Song Yifan's photo. Thinking of what Song Yifan had been through all these years, Su Qianxi felt angry. She stood up and asked, Rong Xian, are you Rong Xian? Rong Xian obviously had no intention of paying attention to her. Her expression was cold. My grandmother asked me to pass a message to you when I see you. When Rong Xian heard that, she turned her head and looked over. There was a trace of emotion on her cold face. She asked, Your grandmother? Chapter 483. That was what Mrs. Song had said to her in tears. That white-haired old man had a hunched back and suffered from mild dementia, but he had never forgotten about Rong Xian. Did the instigator repent? Hearing that, Rong Xian did not seem to be moved at all. Glancing at Su Qianxi coldly, she sneered, Why should I repent? Song Yifan did not want to remarry. What does that have to do with me? Others can live well without me. Why should I be blamed for the destruction of the Song family? Go back and tell Song Yifan that I, Rong Xian, never owed him anything. Although it was an expected attitude, when Su Qianxi heard that, she still felt cold. Not worth it at all. The woman that Song Yifan, Xing Shiming, and Mrs. Song had been thinking about for more than 20 years was actually this kind of person. Su Qianxi was instantly enraged and cursed, You are such an ungrateful person. If my father and grandmother had not taken you in, do you think you could have survived? Rong Xian's hand shrank slightly. She took a deep breath and turned to the side. Her tone was soft but very cold. She said, You can't say that. I also left a child for them, didn't I? You are the blood of the Song family, aren't you? Rong Xian interrupted her and looked at her coldly. Go back. I also have family business to deal with. No, she was not. She was not Song Yifan's daughter at all. They had no blood relationship at all. When Su Qianxi was about to refute, she was pulled by Li Xicheng. Let's go. Li Xicheng's eyes were like the stars and the moon, brilliant in the vastness. He had something to say to her. Su Qianxi saw it and stopped talking, turning to leave. However, before they went far, she heard Rong Xian's cold voice, Rong Haiyue, do you want to do this? Rong Xian is lying. She is lying to Rong Haiyue. Su Qianxi squeezed Li Xicheng's hand and was furious. She clearly knows that my father and I are not biological father and daughter, but she did not let me finish and wanted to drive me away. Was she actually Rong Haiyue's daughter? Their current daughter, Rong Anna, actually didn't look much like them. Rong Haiyue and Rong Xian's facial features were delicate and small, while Rong Anna's facial features were clearly a little deeper and more elegant, a bit like an ethnic minority girl. She's lying. Li Xiqing walked out and whispered, whether it's true or not, can't we do a paternity test? I think Rong Haiyue has already guessed it. He will not sit idly by. No, I'm just here to thank you, not to recognize my father. Su Qianxi rubbed the corner of her clothes. If I am not Rong Haiyue's daughter, then what about Papa Song? I don't think that's what you should be worried about, Li Xiqing said ambiguously, looking in the direction of the Rong family. Rong Anna had already run out, and just then, a sports car passed by behind them. Su Qianxi turned her head and saw a tall figure walking down. Su Qianxi's pupils suddenly shrank. Looking at the other half of the body, she vaguely felt a bit dangerous and familiar. The person also seemed to feel Su Qianxi's gaze and turned to look. The moment he saw Su Qianxi, he was slightly surprised, but soon smiled. Hi. Update. The update for the leader and the president will be postponed to tomorrow. Chapter 484. It was him, Bo Xiao. Bo Xiao was no shorter than Li Xiqing, and even stronger than Li Xiqing. At this moment, he was wearing a military green mid-length casual suit jacket. He was straight, with a chic brooch on his left chest. His hair was dyed a fashionable brownish yellow, slightly curled. At this moment, he got out of the car with a polite and elegant smile on his face. Long time no see, Mr. Li, Mrs. Li. I didn't expect to see you here. Su Qianxi looked at him. This voice, this image, was impressively a noble gentleman. But faintly, Su Qianxi subconsciously overlapped him with another violent and rude man. For a moment, she was slightly dazed. Rong Anna ran out, panting and looking at the man in front of the car. She went up and said, Xiao, my parents are quarreling again. Let's go in and talk to them. Bo Xiao seemed to be a bit helpless. Oh, I can't help it. I'm too tired. Let's go. Don't fight later. Bo Xiao closed the door and threw his sunglasses in. Soon, he nodded slightly to them and said, Excuse me. After that, he walked into the Rong family with Bo Xiao. Although the pace was fast, it was not too slow. This was the result of years of cultivation. Ordinary people could not pretend to be calm and generous. After Bo Xiao and Rong Anna went in, Li Xiqing slowly asked, What's wrong? Su Qianxi looked in that direction and suddenly came back to herself. Gently shaking her head, she said, No, it must be an illusion. What did you see? I'll tell you when we get back. I am sleepy. Okay. Li Xiqing held her in his arms and quickly walked out of the alley and onto the road. When returning to the hotel, Su Qianxi took off her clothes and lay in bed. After thinking for a long time, she said, Honey, I think. She paused and turned her head, only to find that Li Xiqing had disappeared. Honey? She got out of bed and walked out of the living room barefoot. Today, the sun was a bit bright. The golden sunlight shone through the large floor-to-ceiling windows, and the whole room was warm. Li Xiqing was sitting on the sofa and playing with the laptop he brought. On a large dark background, there were codes that she could not understand. His fingers were jumping quickly, and the sound of typing came from the keyboard. She wanted to scare him from behind. Standing on her tiptoes, she tried not to make a sound as she walked, careful and careful. Suddenly, she rushed forward and put her hands on his shoulders. At the same time, the sound of glass being broken rang at the same time. Bang! The TV in the living room made a dull explosion sound. Su Qianxi was shocked and looked at the TV. Li Xiqing turned his head and saw smoke coming out of the hole in the middle of the crack on the TV screen. Those were bullet holes. Li Xiqing's heart skipped a beat. He pushed her hard and rolled to the side with her in his arms. Bang! There was a small hole in the leg of the table, and both sides were transparent. If it hit him, Su Qianxi screamed and trembled. He pulled a stool in front of him, pulled Su Qianxi, and growled, Keep up. Fortunately, they were very close to the door at the moment. Li Xiqing escorted her to the porch and immediately pressed the emergency button. Chapter 485. It was a bright green window that blocked any line of sight from this side. Nothing could be seen. Su Qianxi grabbed his clothes and desperately pulled him out. Go, go. He turned and held her in his arms, quickly walking out of the corridor. Don't be afraid, it's okay. The hotel manager quickly came over, saw them like this, and immediately asked. Call the police. The hotel manager was a bit confused. Sir, what happened? Call the police, can't you hear me? Li Xiqing growled. Su Qianxi, who was holding him tightly, trembled even more. Li Xiqing's voice became soft. It's okay, it's okay. Su Qianxi's hands were shaking. She suddenly looked up, looked into his eyes, and whimpered, she wants to kill me, is it Rongxian, she wants to kill me? Don't think too much. If she wants to kill you, why wait until now? He patted her back and whispered, it's okay, wait for the police to come and let them investigate. A tall figure slowly walked into a rather romantic coffee shop and sat down in front of a beautiful woman. The beautiful woman seemed to ask casually, how is it? Failed. That person's reaction was much faster than I thought. What should we do? If she recognizes us or catches us, we will all die. The tall man chuckled. Oh, my fiancé, you are doubting my intelligence. Did you change the bullets? Of course. The tall man smiled elegantly, his voice very light and low, and even the shape of his lips was very vague. A big shot is coming back from San Francisco, with great wealth. When Rong Haiyue arrived, Li Xiqing and Su Qianxi had finished their statements and were protected. Su Qianxi was obviously frightened, holding Li Xiqing and not letting go. Seeing Rong Haiyue coming, she looked a bit dazed. Are you okay? Rong Haiyue approached slightly and whispered. Li Xiqing gently shook his head, looking at him with a pair of cold eyes, deep and vast, hiding unspeakable kindness and unkindness, extremely complicated. What about Rongxian? Su Qianxi asked. Where was she in the afternoon? Rong Haiyue was slightly stunned. She has been at home since you left, until she called me just now. Then he thought of something. You suspect her? Impossible. Rong Haiyue's face was full of certainty. Back then, she could leave me, a newborn child, at the door of the orphanage. Now I suddenly appeared and ruined her good deeds for so many years. She looked at Rong Haiyue with some sadness. Except for her, I can't think of anyone who wants me dead so much. Every shot was aimed at her body. The bullet pierced through the floor-to-ceiling window and the chair. If it had hit her, she would probably be dead by now. No one was not afraid of death, especially someone like Su Qianxi who had died once. Clearly seeing the fear and distrust in her eyes, Rong Haiyue opened his mouth, but in the end, he did not say a word. The sound of high heels was getting closer. Rong Haiyue turned his head and saw a slender figure in sapphire blue stopping behind them. Chapter 486. Honey, let's go back to Kingstown. She sniffed. I regret it. If I had known this would happen, I would not have come to the capital. I was kicked out and almost died. Yes, let's go back. He stroked her hair and said softly, don't be afraid. It will be fine. Suddenly, Li Xiqing's phone rang. It was Luo Zhan. Hello, Xiqing. Yes. It's not that guy. That guy has not returned to China yet, and the people who have conflicts with you are not in the capital. Just in case, I also screened all the call records and did not find any. And didn't you decide to go to the capital temporarily? Only your family knows about it, right? Even if those people have 3 heads and 6 arms, they can't reach that far. In addition to the people you just told me, who else has this motive? Can you think about it? The phone was put between Li Xiqing and Su Qianxi, and she also heard these words clearly. Frowning, she thought hard for a long while before saying a name, Tang Menjiang. Tang Menjiang is in Kingstown First Hospital. She has not been discharged yet, and she has no communication tools on her. Laurel is taking care of her, and no one else is in contact with her. She can't have a second Rong Roy who is willing to do things for her, right? Luo Zhan said indifferently. Li Xiqing's eyes flashed and looked at Rong Haiyue in front of him. Rong Haiyue could not hear the content of their conversation, but seeing Li Xiqing's eyes, he suddenly felt a little ominous. You check Rong Roy's current location and call records. Report all his itinerary and movements in the past 2 days to me. Okay. Hearing Rong Roy's name, Rong Haiyue's face became a bit dignified. He said, Rong Roy is my nephew. I know, Li Xiqing said quietly. Now, I am focusing on the motive of the Rong family. First, Rong Roy is against us. Now, almost no one knows that we came to the capital except you. However, such a thing can happen. You don't believe it if it is an accident, do you, Major General Rong? I have no motive to do this. You know, if I wanted her to die, I would not have saved her in the first place. Rong Haiyue was anxious and looked at Li Xiqing. She is very likely to be my biological daughter. How can I want to hurt her? Su Qianxi heard the words, looked up at him, and then looked behind him. Rong Xian stood, looking at Rong Haiyue with a complicated look. Rong Haiyue, you think too much. This is Song Yifun's daughter. Your daughter's name is Rong Anna. Have you forgotten the name you gave her? She is the same age as Anna. Rong Haiyue looked back at her. And, do you really think I don't know? Anna is not related to me by blood at all. I didn't say anything because I'm giving you face, Rong Xian. Ha. Rong Xian's face suddenly changed. She looked at Rong Haiyue coldly. You went for the identification? Chapter 487. Rong Haiyue's voice was a bit loud, and the police outside looked over. Rong Xian immediately closed the door and locked it. For a time, there were only 4 of them in the room, 2 couples. Rong Haiyue looked at Rong Xian as if he was looking at a madwoman. He reached out and grabbed her arm. Staring at her with reddish eyes, he asked word by word, back then, you were really pregnant and gave birth to the child, but you lost my daughter, right? Rong Xian looked at him with pity and did not speak. Such an attitude undoubtedly confirmed Rong Haiyue's guess. Rong Haiyue was silent for a moment and suddenly chuckled. Then, where did Anna come from? Anna is not your daughter, nor is she my daughter. Then what about her biological parents? Dead. Rong Xian's voice was a bit hoarse, with an imperceptible sob. I found her under the bridge. Her mother was holding her, and her body was still bleeding. She begged me to save her, so I picked her up, but her mother could not be saved and died. Then, Rong Xian chuckled and looked at Rong Haiyue with pity. Her mother told me that Anna was pregnant by a whore. Do you think it's tragic? A bastard, ha. Rong Haiyue's heart felt like it had been hammered. An indescribable pain almost burst out. With a big hand, Rong Haiyue slapped her hard in the face. Rong Xian was hit suddenly, and she was caught off guard. Her feet were crooked, and her whole body fell to the ground. The side of his face that had been slapped instantly swelled up, and it was burning hot. Rong Xian was a bit dazed, covering her face and looking at Rong Haiyue, who had been taking care of her for more than 20 years, incredulous. Startled, Su Qianxi let out a cry. Rong Xian looked at the hatred in Rong Haiyue's eyes and suddenly laughed loudly. You hit me? Rong Haiyue, you actually hit me? Ha ha ha. You can't stand it? Do you know that when she was young, I went to buy 2 buns and threw them on the ground. I asked her to pick them up and she really did it. Ha. I really wanted to take a photo to show you that this is your daughter. This is Rong Haiyue's biological daughter. She is not even comparable to a beggar. But you're feeding a bastard from God knows where, treating him like a princess. Before Rong Xian could finish her sentence, she could not utter another syllable. Rong Haiyue grabbed her neck with his big hand. His face was completely red, and his eyes were wet. He did not show any mercy. He wanted to kill her. Li Xiqing was shocked and immediately went to pull him away. However, Rong Haiyue had lost his mind at the moment and was incredibly strong. Rong Xian's face turned purple. She pinched his hand with both of her hands, her legs flailing desperately. No, no. Su Qianxi cried and immediately opened the door, shouting, "Help! Police, police, where are you?" 2 police officers stationed immediately ran over. Seeing the situation inside, the 3 joined forces to pull Rong Haiyue away. And Rong Xian's neck had been strangled with a layer of purple, looking extraordinarily hideous. Rong Haiyue was pulled away. With red eyes and a red face, he shouted and was about to rush to Rong Xian, hysterically saying, "Rong Xian, what do I owe you? You have to do this to me." Rong Xian covered her sore throat, her eyes moist because of the pain. She sneered coldly, her voice hoarse, but indifferent to the bone. She said, "You deserve it." Chapter 488. Rong Xian's attitude not only angered Rong Haiyue more. At this moment, even he wanted to throw this woman into the sea to feed the fish. Su Qianxi stood far away, looking at this sober but indifferent so-called mother. All the illusions and flukes that she had always held were all disillusioned. Why did she do this? Rong Haiyue was such a good man. From their conversation, Su Qianxi could see that he loved his wife and daughter very much. But why could such a woman get his love? Su Qianxi could not understand, but what made her even more incomprehensible was why Rong Xian treated her like this. At that time, she was still a baby in swaddling clothes. She was placed at the door of the orphanage during the National Day holiday. What if no one found her? In that case, was she already dead by now? Rong Xian met her eyes, curled her lips coldly, and climbed up from the ground. After a stumble, she quickly recovered her usual elegance and calmness. Fixing her hair and clothes, Rong Xian took her handbag and walked out the door. Her legs were straight, her steps were calm, and she was as elegant as a lady walking out of a comic book. It was as if the woman who had just spoken hysterically to retaliate against Rong Haiyue was not her at all. A policeman stopped her. "Ma'am, you need to go back with us to make a statement. The injury on your neck also needs to be dealt with." Rong Haiyue had been arrested by the police. Looking at her back, he took a deep breath and looked up at the ceiling, not letting his tears fall. Rong Xian pushed the policeman away indifferently and said, "No, deal with that person. It is best to put him in jail for 8 or 10 years and dismiss him." Ha, ha ha, Rong Xian. Su Qianxi could not bear it and quickly walked up. Li Xiqing was shocked and shouted, "Be careful." Su Qianxi ignored him and walked to Rong Xian, shouting, "You psycho, crazy, ungrateful." He was simply a psychopath. Is Rong Haiyue not good to you? He loves you so much. Why do you treat him like this? Rong Xian looked at her coldly. After a long while, she chuckled and said in a hoarse voice, "You know nothing." After saying that, he reached out his hand to push her away, and with graceful steps, he leisurely walked forward. Su Qianxi felt like she had punched cotton. Instead of venting her anger, she felt even more aggrieved. He was so angry that he stomped his feet, turned around, and immediately ran up to Rong Xian. However, just as he was about to say something, he saw the tears flowing down Rong Xian's cheeks. That pair of eyes that were extremely similar to her own hid deep and obscure emotions, like regret, enlightenment, and pain. As tears flowed down, they were exposed in front of her eyes. However, Rong Xian immediately wiped away her tears and walked even faster. She walked around her in large strides and quickly left. Su Qianxi froze, watching the 2 police officers ready to take Rong Haiyue away. Why? Rong Haiyue did nothing wrong. Rong Anna was playing games at home. The door was opened, and the elegant sound of high heels approached. Rong Anna didn't need to look to know who it was. She didn't raise her head and shouted, "Mom, you're back." Where's Dad? No one responded. Chapter 489. Rong Xian seemed to be in a bad mood, and Rong Anna could only see her back. Rong Xian went straight into the door, and Rong Anna heard the sound of the door being locked. Inexplicable. For so many years, she always felt that Rong Xian was living in her own world. She refused to communicate with people and refused anyone to enter, including her husband and daughter. Rong Anna didn't care, sat down, and continued to play games. Rong Xian threw herself on the bed. Her neck was still very painful, and with the shaking of her body, there was a burst of tearing feeling. Picking up the mirror at the bedside, the purple mark was shocking. This was done by Rong Haiyue himself. The Rong Haiyue, who always wanted to please her and keep her by his side, did it himself. He really wanted to kill her. Lying on the bed, Rong Xian's heart was terribly empty, as if something was quietly passing away in her heart that had not been filled in for more than 20 years. Looking at the ceiling, Rong Haiyue's face seemed to appear in front of her, with a smile, with humble concern, and came to her with a smile, but she had stepped on him for more than 20 years. After a while, Rong Xian smiled. You deserve it. She didn't know how many years it had been since she had this dream. In the dream, she was wearing a red bridal dress, sitting shyly on the bed. The matchmaker in the town had been talking to her since the early hours of the morning, teaching her a lot of things. Rong Xian smiled shyly. Thinking of marrying that person, she couldn't stop the sweetness in her heart. Finally, they were going to be together. Although they still couldn't get a marriage certificate, this was not a problem at all, was it? However, a figure suddenly appeared outside the window. Rong Xian thought her eyes were playing tricks on her. Only when he spoke did she suddenly wake up. It was him, he had found his way here. What was her reaction at the time? Like falling into an ice cellar, her whole body was cold, and she froze in place. The matchmaker was saying auspicious words outside, and Rong Xian lied to her that she was going to find something and would be back soon. When he found Rong Haiyue, he took her and went to the river bank. He said, "Come back with me, Rong Xian. Mom only has a few days left. Now she just wants to see me get married. Come back with me and fulfill her last wish, okay?" Rong Xian forgot what she had said. She did not know which sentence had angered Rong Haiyue. There was a cement road that had just been repaired, and there was still a large patch of grass that had not been flattened. He pulled her into the bushes. Rong Xian cried and begged him not to. However, every time she called him brother, it triggered the anger in his heart. He entered her mercilessly, and when he realized that she had lost her virginity, he flew into a rage. Xian. It was Song Yifan. He had come to see her. Rong Haiyue pinched her and gritted his teeth. Louder. Let him see what you are doing. Let's see if he still wants you. In the end, she did not dare to make a sound, and Rong Haiyue did not move either. The two held their breath until Song Yifan was far away. Then he pressed her down mercilessly and ravaged her. After that, Rong Xian's clothes were ruined. She whimpered and ran around. At that time, Rong Haiyue drove the old car he borrowed, caught her in the town, and forced her into the car. He tied her up in the back seat and drove back to the capital. He locked her in the warehouse. As long as she was obedient, he would be gentle. Chapter 490. She didn't want it, she didn't want it. She cried and said, "You are the brother, and this is called incest." He pressed her down mercilessly, using his body to tell her that it wasn't. She was his child bride, and she was destined to marry him, wasn't she? The huge phone rang, and Rong Xian suddenly woke up from her sleep. She wiped her face, which was already wet. The phone was still ringing. She picked it up, and it was a strange number. It was Kingstown. She picked it up, and neither side spoke. After a few seconds, there was a soft female voice. "You want to accuse him? It was clearly your fault. You angered him, so he would do that to you. You. You are at the police station? Yes. Let the police answer the phone. Su Qianxi was silent for a moment, feeling that Rong Xian would hurt him, so she did not move. You called me to ask me to let him go, didn't you? Rong Xian chuckled, and her voice was still hoarse. Domestic violence, the police can't do anything about it. I will not accuse him. Ask them to let him go. Really? Su Qianxi was a bit surprised and handed the phone to a staff member. Sure enough, after he answered the phone, he looked at Su Qianxi strangely. When Rong Haiyue came out, it was already late at night. Su Qianxi was so sleepy that she lay in his arms, half asleep. Suddenly, she saw Rong Haiyue coming out and was a bit surprised. You're out. Rong Haiyue saw her surprised little face, and a pair of sharp eyes were sad. I'm sorry. Su Qianxi was dazed, feeling a bit strange about his sudden apology. I hurt you. If it weren't for me, you wouldn't have ended up like that. I thought. Rong Haiyue's voice was a little choked, and his eyes were slightly red. I thought that no matter how cruel she was, she wouldn't hurt a child. No matter how much she hated me, she still had maternal love for her child. Later, although I knew that Anna was not my daughter, I didn't tell her. I was afraid that she would be angry and leave. Su Qianxi's eyes were hot, and tears immediately fell. If I had discovered it earlier and asked her earlier, you wouldn't have suffered so much. I'm sorry. Li Xiqing held her and listened to Rong Haiyue's confession. He couldn't help but feel sad for them. Shortly after dawn, Rong Haiyue asked Su Qianxi to go to the hospital for a test, and she agreed. Later, Su Qianxi did not sleep all night. Rong Haiyue sent someone to protect them. After letting Su Qianxi rest, the two of them got on the plane back to Kingstown. After getting off the plane, he received a WeChat message from Rong Haiyue. It was a picture. There was no doubt that the paternity test showed that Su Qianxi and Rong Haiyue were biological father and daughter. Su Qianxi stared at the picture for a long while, feeling very complicated. Should I let Papa Song know? He stroked her hair and whispered, do you think it's necessary to let him know? Yes, but it's too cruel. Let nature take its course. Father-in-law Song has long known that you are not his biological daughter, and he has long known that you are Rong Xian's daughter. When the two of them meet one day, they will naturally know. Okay. On the 7th day of the Lunar New Year, Yang had not yet come to work, so Li Xiqing took his wife to a taxi. Shortly after getting in the car, he received a call from Yu Yuegui, who sounded hurried. Sir, Miss Tang has gone crazy. 3 o'clock, 3 o'clock to be completed before 9:30. Chapter 491. Sir, Miss Tang is crazy. When they arrived at the Kingstown First Hospital, Tang Menjing had been restrained, sedated, tied, and locked on the bed. Unexpectedly, when Tang Menjing saw them, she was not hysterical or struggling. She just looked at them and laughed like a psycho. The laughter was getting louder and louder. There was a hint of morbid madness and calm mockery. Looking at Li Xiqing, her eyes were already red, and tears were on the verge of falling. Su Qianxi was scared by her laughter. Laurel explained to Li Xiqing, early in the morning, she said she wanted to eat lotus seed and tremella soup and asked me to make it for her. How could I go out? I could only find a place to buy it for her. However, who knew, she ran into the baby incubator, picked up the baby, and smashed him on the ground. Su Qianxi's heart skipped a beat and asked, where is the baby? He has been sent to the emergency room. The initial diagnosis seems to be a broken bone. There is blood all over his body, and he was crying miserably. The baby was born prematurely, and his body was already weak. It is still unknown whether he could be saved. How can there be such a mother? She is worse than an animal. Laurel was furious, wiping her tears as she spoke. She went out to mess around. Poor child, having such a mother, so poor. Tang Menjing heard this and did not react at all. Worse than an animal, this kind of thing. During the time she was lying in the hospital, she had heard this kind of thing too many times. But why did she have to live like this? She was indeed worse than an animal. Tang Menjing stared at Li Xicheng and smiled happily. Su Qianxi's eyes were overflowing with tears. Looking at Tang Menjing's delirious look, she whispered, "Pervert. What did the newborn child owe her? Why should the child be involved in the grievances of the previous generation? Rong Xian was that kind of person, making her an orphan. In her words, when she was a child, her life was worse than that of a beggar. Now Tang Menjing was the same kind of person. What could be wrong with a newborn child? Did you call the police?" Laurel was dazed, looked at her, and nodded. "Yes. Look at her. She committed murder." Su Qianxi wiped her tears. "I'm going to see the child." "Where is he?" "In the emergency room, not out yet." Before Laurel finished, he and Su Qianxi had left the ward. Tang Menjing closed her eyes and lay in bed. The child's shoulder bone was comminuted. He was temporarily saved, but because the child's body was too weak, whether or not he could really survive depended on his recovery. Hearing the doctor's words, Su Qianxi was so distressed that her tears fell. The child's facial features were very beautiful. His little hands and feet were curled up, and there were still traces of tears on his face. He had already fallen asleep. She seemed to have nothing to do with Tang Menjing, but she was born by such a woman. Su Qianxi looked at the baby in the box and took Li Xicheng's hand. Li Xicheng also looked at him. His cold eyes seemed to have seen through everything. Su Qianxi opened her mouth, but did not say anything. She put her arms around his waist and sobbed. Chapter 492. Think about it. This is Tang Menjing's child, the child of the Tang family. Li Xicheng's voice was very low, and he reached out and stroked her hair. The ungrateful genes of this family are stronger than you think. Su Qianxi tightened her grip and looked up at him. At the beginning of life, people are naturally kind. I think the environment should be more important than the so-called genetic influence. We should educate him well and make him a child of the Li family. Isn't that enough? You want him to call you mom? Li Xicheng looked a little reluctant. Gazing at her with a pair of deep eyes, he whispered, "When he grows up, he may hate you. He may hate us for driving his biological mother into a dead end. He may hate us for driving the Tang family into a dead end. When he grows up, he may want to find his biological mother. Is that okay?" "No," Su Qianxi sobbed. "I know this feeling best. Don't forget Rong Xian." What was the difference between Rong Xian and Tang Menjing now? In fact, Tang Menjing is even worse than Rong Xian. I hate Rong Xian. When the child grows up, he will definitely feel the same as I do now. Besides, we saved him now, and he will be grateful to us in the future, right? Don't underestimate the ungrateful genes of the Tang family, Mrs. Li. Su Qianxi bowed her head and stopped talking. Tang Menjing was quickly taken away by the police. For a month and a half, the only family that supported and helped her was the Lu family. During this period, she appealed twice and was finally sentenced to 10 years in prison for attempted murder. Since the shooting incident in the capital, Li Xicheng immediately went to Star City to find a female bodyguard to follow Su Qianxi. According to Li Xicheng's idea, he originally wanted to send her too, but Su Qianxi was afraid that it would be too high profile. In the end, she chose a tall and thin girl with an ordinary appearance. As a pregnant woman for 3 months, Su Qianxi's performance seemed to be no different from ordinary people, except that she was a bit sleepy, a bit picky about what she ate, and occasionally had heartburn. It had been almost a month since school started, and Su Qianxi was in a half-awake state almost every day. After class, the bodyguard Shuang Yu helped her carry her bag and escorted her home. On this day, Su Qianxi was directly taken back to Yuxiu Villa by Yang's driver after school. There were also 2 bodyguards standing at the door. When they saw her return, they bowed slightly to her. Su Qianxi had long been used to this scene and walked in calmly. As soon as she got home, she smelled the hot and sour fish Nanny Rong made for her. Su Qianxi dropped her bag and went into the kitchen, almost drooling. Washing her hands, she sat at the table and asked, "Where is he?" Nanny Rong gave her a bowl of rice and said, "Mr. Jiang hasn't come back yet. I heard that the company has been very busy recently. By the way, I heard that Tang Menjing went crazy and was locked up in a mental hospital. Did Mr. Jiang tell you what happened?" Su Qianxi took the rice and shook her head. "No, is Tang Menjing really crazy? I heard from Sir on the phone this morning that she seemed to have bitten off the warden's ear while he was still alive. After she was sent to the mental hospital for a checkup, they found out that she had long gone mad. Coupled with the fact that she was bullied in prison, she is now in a very dangerous situation." Chapter 493. Don't be impatient. Mr. Li is doing this for your own good. You should have listened to Captain Li and not let you go to school. Mr. Li can't argue with you. It's better to send a few more people. If something goes wrong, it will be bad. I know. Su Qianxi had a good appetite. After eating 2 bowls of rice, she went upstairs with her bag. After the shower, Su Qianxi heard the sound of breathing in the room. While drying her hair, she walked toward the bed and called, "Honey." However, there was no response. Su Qianxi did not care. Sitting on the bed and drying her hair, she crossed her legs and picked up the pregnancy book on the bedside, flipping through it. However, the breathing became louder and louder. Su Qianxi looked up and saw no one. Putting the book back, Su Qianxi went into the cloakroom and tentatively called, "Honey?" It was dark inside. She turned on the light, but there was no one. Drying her hair and walking out, Su Qianxi looked at the bed again. No one was there. She opened the door and looked out. Li Xiqing had just opened the door and walked in. Seeing her coming out, his cold face softened. Seeing him, Su Qianxi was dazed. At the same time, she heard breathing behind her. Su Qianxi was stiff, and her breathing suddenly became rapid. Her arms were stiff, and she did not even dare to move. Seeing her increasingly strange face, Li Xiqing felt a bit strange. Su Qianxi did not dare to move, sobbing and asking for help. "Honey," Li Xiqing suddenly felt something was wrong. He strode upstairs, taking 3 steps at a time. When he came to Su Qianxi, he found that she was already soaked in cold sweat and stiff. Su Qianxi shivered and whispered, "In the room, there is someone else." Li Xiqing's heart skipped a beat. Hugging her, he called, "Cheng, da." The 2 bodyguards at the door heard the noise and immediately ran in. Seeing Li Xiqing upstairs, the 2 rushed up at the same time. When Cheng and Da came up, Li Xiqing hugged Su Qianxi and stared inside. The 2 bodyguards immediately understood and went inside to rummage through it. Li Xiqing and Su Qianxi walked in and saw Ah Cheng open the curtains of the floor-to-ceiling windows. They suddenly saw a hideous clown doll stuck to the window. Su Qianxi shuddered and screamed in fear. He patted her shoulder. "It's okay. Don't be afraid." The clown doll was a mini stereo. As soon as the floor-to-ceiling windows opened, she could hear the sudden breathing sound. It was extremely loud. The bodyguard took down the clown, checked it, and gave it to Li Xiqing. At the same time, the bodyguard Ada handed over a sapphire blue book that he had just found on the windowsill. Under the clown's speaker was a sticky note with messy handwriting. "I heard your wife is pregnant." The strange sound coming from the speaker, coupled with the strange note, made Li Xiqing's heart skip a beat. His eyes, which had no warmth to begin with, were now stained with a layer of frost and deadly venom, making him shudder. Cheng and Da had not been with Li Xiqing for long, and it was the first time they had seen a master like this. The 2 looked at each other and stood aside respectfully. Su Qianxi took the sapphire blue book, which had 4 big words printed on it, "Mom's Diary." Opening it, the beautiful handwriting was on the paper. The owner of this book was Tang Menjing. Chapter 494. Isn't Tang Menjing locked up? How could she? Su Qianxi was scared. Grabbing his sleeve, she couldn't help feeling scared. What does she want to do? Don't be afraid. It's not her. Li Xiqing narrowed his eyes and had an idea. That person just wants to scare you. He can't do anything to you now. Who could it be? The Tang family, or the Lu family? The Lu family? Mrs. Tang's maiden family? Yes. Li Xiqing nodded. I will take you to the old house first. During this time, let's stay here, okay? Su Qianxi nodded. Li Xiqing winked at the two bodyguards, who immediately understood, closed the door and left. Su Qianxi packed a few simple clothes, but as she was doing so, she felt something was wrong. The Tang family has now been defeated. Tang Zhenghao is missing. Mrs. Tang is in prison and infected with AIDS. Tang Menjing has been admitted to a mental hospital. Even Tang Mengqing has been forced by your uncle's family not to contact Li Weiya. The Tang family is now besieged and helpless. As long as the Lu family is a little smart, they will know to stay away from the Tang family. Why did the Lu family still work for Tang Zhenghao? Su Qianxi suddenly remembered the mysterious force that had helped Tang Menjing in her previous lifetime. Previously, she thought it had something to do with Rong Rui, but now Rong Rui was with Qingyu, and Qingyu had no reason to betray Li Xiqing. So, who was the mysterious force? Su Qianxi frowned and looked at Li Xiqing. Looking at her, Li Xiqing's eyes lit up and explained, benefits. Mrs. Tang married Tang Zhenghao for profit. The Lu family has been following the orders of the Tang family for many years, also for profit. Although the Tang family has been defeated, it has not affected the Lu family. As long as they can still get benefits, they will not stay away because of the Tang family's defeat. After a pause, Li Xiqing continued, Tang Zhenghao is in San Francisco and has been in contact with a gang. When I sent someone to follow Tang Zhenghao, I accidentally saw them trading. My people were almost killed there. A deal? Su Qianxi suddenly had a bad feeling. Drugs? Looking at her, Li Xiqing nodded and said, yes. So, this time when Tang Zhenghao comes back from San Francisco, he will definitely bring cash or drugs with him. I have sent people to surround that place. As long as he enters the territory, he will be surrounded. At that time, Tang Zhenghao and the Lu family can be uprooted to avoid future troubles. Su Qianxi was shocked. Li Xiqing was decisive and ruthless, leaving no room for negotiation. As long as it was a threat to him, he would never tolerate it. Su Qianxi did not know if this was a good or a bad thing, but she was always worried. Li Xiqing seemed to know what she was thinking. He gently hugged her and whispered, I don't want what happened today to happen a second time. There will not be a next time. I want our child to be born and grow up safely. Be careful. I always feel it will not be so simple. Su Qianxi hugged him back and looked up at him. Chapter 495. It doesn't matter. Even if we can't catch Tang Zhenghao trading goods, the sky-high debt he owes is enough to make him suffer. With such a large amount of money, he will be locked up for at least 10 or 20 years. When he comes out, he will already be an old man. Li Xiqing pressed his forehead against hers and chuckled. Do you think your man is no match for an old man? She gently pushed him and said, be careful of Tang Menjing. Be careful of Tang Zhenghao, especially Tang Menjing. I always feel that she suddenly became crazy. It's a bit weird. Li Xiqing had also considered this question, but at this moment, hearing her say it, he felt a bit amazed. Touching her hair, he sighed. Mrs. Li is getting better and better. Pfft, I've always been very strong. Is that so? How so? Let me see. With that, he reached out to touch her face. Here. Here. Or here. His big hand moved down, touching her neck and her chest. She blushed and slapped his hand away. Don't be serious. Pack up and go to the old house. Alright, let's go back to the old house to sleep. You're annoying, I'm just sleeping. What are you thinking about? After sending Su Qianxi back to the old house to comfort her, he did not go to rest with her but called San Francisco. How is it? Already on board. Estimated to arrive at 7 a.m. tomorrow morning. Flight number is Kong Hang 3556. Before he finished, he heard the polite voice of the stewardess. My phone is off. I will call you when I land. Yes. Hanging up the phone, he called Xingyu. Send all the evidence of Tang Zhenghao's illegal embezzlement and breach of contract to Xing Shiming. Contact the person in charge of Xingfeng and inform him of Tang Zhenghao's whereabouts. Yes, boss. Li Xiqing hung up and immediately called Luo Zhan. Keep an eye on Tang Zhenghao's movements at Kingstown Airport and wait for an opportunity to manage and arrange hunting. Okay. Li Xiqing also asked Tang Menjing to be more guarded, just in case. Tang Zhenghao was the only one left in the Tang family. Without Tang Zhenghao, the backbone, the Lu family was nothing to be afraid of. Once he was done with this and settled this matter, the wedding should be put on the agenda. Li Xiqing turned on the computer and looked at the scene that he had designed, curling his lips. He would take her to Ireland and give her the most beautiful wedding of her dreams. It must be unforgettable. Su Qianxi took Tang Menjing's mother's diary and sat on the edge of the bed. The diary recorded Tang Menjing's expectations for the baby in the first 3 months. Between the lines, it was full of maternal love and expectations for the baby. However, after writing for 3 months, he stopped and did not add anything else. Later, she was imprisoned by Li Xiqing, right? Or, had she found out that the child was not Li Xiqing's? Su Qianxi felt that she was a bit sad. She flipped the book, and the middle page was automatically opened. It could be seen that it was frequently flipped to this page, which was why there was such an obvious gap, and it automatically flipped to this page. On this page, there was a logo. It was a flame in the shape of a wolf's head, with a star in the center. The lines were clear, and they were drawn with a colorful pen. Chapter 496. Li Xiqing did not return all night. When Su Qianxi slept until midnight, she found that he did not come back. When she called him, his phone showed that it was busy. Looking out the window, the sky was bright, and the wind was a bit strong, making a swishing sound. Su Qianxi rarely got up so early. After washing, she went out of the living room. It was the first time that Li Jinan saw his sister-in-law so early and said hello. Hi, sister-in-law, so early? Yeah. Su Qianxi took out her cell phone and dialed his number again. Li Jinan leaned over and asked, call my brother? Yes, your second brother did not come back last night, and no one answered the phone. Maybe he is busy with work. Don't worry, he will not fool around outside. Li Jinan opened a bottle of Coke. Our brothers are very self-disciplined. I am not worried about that. I am worried about something else. The phone could not be reached again, and Su Qianxi panicked even more. She simply called Xingyu. After about a dozen rings, the phone was picked up, but it was a male voice. Su Qianxi was dazed and looked at it. It was 6:00 in the morning, and it was Xingyu. Hello? I am looking for Xingyu. She is sleeping. The male voice was a bit hoarse, and he added, this is Rong Rui. Oh, that's all right. Let her continue to sleep. Okay, I'm hanging up. But then, Su Qianxi thought of something and shouted, wait. Is there anything else? Rong Rui's voice was a bit sleepy, a bit low. Obviously, he was still in the room. You and Tang Menjing should have no contact, right? In the future, you should not help Tang Menjing or the Tang family, right? After a silence, about 3 or 4 seconds, Rong Rui said, speaking of it, you are still my cousin. I hurt you before, sorry, but I have completely broken up with that woman. If you need any help, you can find me. Now, I am Qingyu's boyfriend. Shameless, who is your girlfriend? Cheng Yu's voice came over the phone, a bit muffled, obviously under the quilt. Rong Roy chuckled and said, if there is nothing else, I am hanging up. Goodbye, cousin. With his affirmative answer, she suddenly felt a lot more assured. However, if she could not find Li Xicheng, she would not feel at ease. If he couldn't find Cheng Yu, what about Luo Zhan? Su Qianxi was just trying her luck to find Luo Zhan. She did not expect Luo Zhan to answer the phone so quickly, and his voice was very clear. Hello, sister-in-law. Luo Zhan, do you know where my husband is? I don't know, but he must be busy at this time. He will be home soon. Don't wait for him. Go to sleep first. Luo Zhan said the sentence as if he was reciting it. At the end, he added, second brother asked me to tell you not to worry. Just protect yourself and your child. What's the situation? Another familiar voice came into her ears. It was Lu Yihan. Luo Zhan looked up at him, his hands still busy on the keyboard, and said, not bad. Want to eat? Okay, I want a sandwich. Thank you, Auntie Lu. Su Qianxi was dazed. When did they live together? Lu Yihan was making breakfast for him. Chapter 497. Holding the phone, Su Qianxi looked at Li Jinnan and asked, where did he go? Inexplicably, Su Qianxi's heart was indescribably flustered. Li Jinnan saw that she was not right, looked at the phone, and said, today is Saturday. If you don't have class, go back and sleep for a while. When my brother comes back, I will ask him to see you. I can't sleep. I always feel that something will happen to him. Uncle, can you take me to him? Li Jinnan heard that and laughed, saying, didn't you just call Luo Zhan? Since he has arranged it, then nothing will happen. I still trust my second brother's ability. I believe it too, but don't think too much. If that guy knows that you are cursing him like this, he will not be happy. It was just spring, and the weather was still very cold. Li Jinnan was wearing a tight black shirt, drinking a frozen Coke. The expression on his face seemed to be saying that Su Qianxi was thinking too much. Su Qianxi pursed her lips and went into the room with the phone. Seeing that Su Qianxi had left, the expression on Li Jinnan's face gradually became serious. He picked up the remote pager that had been hidden in his palm and whispered, come back soon. Sister-in-law is very worried about you. Kingstown Airport, a flashy and luxurious yellow Porsche sports car had been parked near the terminal for several minutes. In it sat a man wrapped in black clothes, wearing sunglasses and a cap. He was looking at the terminal entrance. In the back seat of the Porsche, Li Xicheng transferred the last document with his mobile phone, pressed the headset, and said, got it. Tell her not to worry about me. I will be back soon. Isn't it just Tang Zhenghao? Can he grow wings and fly away? Why do you have to keep an eye on him? If I don't get rid of him, I can't rest easy. His intention yesterday was obvious. He wanted to do something to her. I don't want anything to happen to her. You keep an eye on her. It's best not to let her stay in the room alone. You can ask her to come out of the living room to chat. I'll leave it to you, Jinnan. As soon as he said that, he suddenly saw someone running out of the terminal with a bag, followed by several men in black. The person who was being chased was slightly fat, wearing a suit, a hat, sunglasses, and a mask. Just by looking at his figure and attire, who else could it be but Tang Zhenghao? That's enough. Take care of her, Li Xicheng said, urging the driver in front of him. Catch up. The yellow Porsche started up, and a loud sound could be heard. Tang Zhenghao immediately looked over and was shocked. He quickly ran, and soon, they were out of the highway. A nearby patrolman saw this and immediately shouted, "What are you doing?" One of the men chasing Tang Zhenghao took out his police badge and shouted, "Police, that's a wanted criminal. Arrest him." The man turned back and ran as fast as he could. The wind was strong today, and his hat was blown away, revealing his white hair. He was even more certain that it was Tang Zhenghao. The yellow Porsche sped like the wind and made a huge screeching noise as it drifted in front of the man. Tang Zhenghao immediately braked. Unable to escape, he actually wanted to jump over the fence to escape. A row of people quickly rushed up. One of the criminal police pushed him down and handcuffed him immediately. Seeing this, many people let out a sigh of relief. However, after lifting his hat, mask, and sunglasses, they found that his nose and eyes were not the same as Tang Zhenghao's at all. Camouflage. Li Xiqing felt a burst of anger in his chest. He couldn't help looking at the door of the terminal. There was a slightly chubby figure wrapped up like a dumpling, covering his face and walking very fast with a bag in his hand. With a cold look, he shouted, "There he is. Catch up." Dash. Chapter 498. The yellow Porsche turned in an instant, and the beautiful sound of the engine went straight at the bloated figure. The real Tang Zhenghao's footsteps were even faster, and he immediately started running. Tang Zhenghao immediately rushed to the front, crossed the railing, and entered the road inside. The yellow Porsche stopped, and Li Xiqing immediately got out and ran after him. Although he had not trained with the army for many years, he still had the foundation, and he ran as fast as the criminal police chasing him. Seeing Li Xiqing getting closer and closer, Tang Zhenghao became more and more panicked. Finally, he gritted his teeth. When he was ready to fight with Li Xiqing, a gust of wind passed by, accompanied by the sound of tires rubbing against the ground. "Get in the car." A woman's voice was deliberately suppressed, but Li Xiqing vaguely felt it was a bit familiar. The woman was wearing a black knitted hat, long curly hair, and a large pair of sunglasses covering half of her face. Tang Zhenghao finally let out a sigh of relief, opened the door of the back seat, and sat in the car. Just when the door was about to close, Li Xiqing grabbed the door with his big hand, panting, and reached out to pull Tang Zhenghao out. Tang Zhenghao was scared out of his wits. He grabbed his hand and shouted, "Drive, drive quickly." The car quickly started, and Li Xiqing was dragged by the car, but his hand was still very steady. With the help of the car, Li Xiqing actually wanted to get in the car. "Idiot!" The woman in the front seat cursed. Li Xiqing subconsciously looked up and saw a man and a woman sitting in front of him. The driver was a man who looked very tall, wearing a military green cap and a mask, only showing his eyes, staring coldly at Li Xiqing in the rearview mirror. Just a glance, and then Li Xiqing heard the sound of a gun being loaded. Shocked, Li Xiqing immediately let go of the car. The speed was too fast, and he lost his balance and was thrown out of the car. "Mr. Li." The driver immediately got out and ran over. Li Xiqing was thrown out and rolled twice on the ground. When he came back to himself, the black car had gone far away. "Are you okay?" Zhou Qin helped Li Xiqing up and asked. Li Xiqing patted the dust on his body and shook his head. "I'm fine. Your face and hands are still fine." If the second wife knew about this, she would be worried sick. Li Xiqing then felt the burning pain on his body. His left cheek, in particular, looked as if it had been burnt. The skin on his palms had been abraded, and his body was riddled with holes. Mud and dust were stuck to his body. But at this moment, he had no time to care about himself. Looking at the black car that had gone far away, he silently wrote down the license plate number, reached for his cell phone in his pocket, and pressed it, only to find that it was out of battery. "Give me your phone." Li Xiqing reached out his hand. His palm was scratched and oozing yellow and red sticky liquid, which looked a bit hideous. Zhou Qin quickly took out his phone and entered the license plate number. "Ask Luo Zhan to check this license plate number and all the routes they have taken today. Keep an eye on them. There are not only wanted drug dealers but also guns." Zhou Chen's expression turned serious. "Yes." Li Xiqing returned to the car and took a deep breath. Seeing himself in a mess, he said, "Let's go back to the company and change before going back. It's too ugly to go back like this." Pfft. Chapter 499. Aren't there more people in the company? They are all at work at this time. Today is Saturday. Hurry up. My wife is waiting for me to go back. Oh, what's the hurry? I'm reversing the car, but you'd better go to the hospital. Look at your face. Li Xiqing looked in the rearview mirror. There was at least a 3-finger-sized scratch on his left cheek, with blood and a piece of skin. Well, it was really ugly. Okay, go to the hospital. Okay. He first went to the hospital to deal with the wound, and then went to the company's cloakroom to change clothes. Just when he was changing clothes, he found that there were many scratches on his body. No wonder it was burning everywhere. Oh no, he had thought that he could finally make out with his wife when she was more than 3 months pregnant. Now, he did not even dare to take off his clothes. If she saw it, she would be heartbroken. Li Xiqing suddenly felt that he should not have gotten involved in this mess. He did not catch Tang Zhenghao, and now he could not even touch his wife. Alas, however, it was also because of this fight that Li Xiqing was more certain of his original guess. There was a drug gang behind Tang Zhenghao. The 2 people sitting in front and the man driving should be the gangster who held Su Qianxi at the gate of Star City last time, and the woman was undoubtedly the accomplice who rescued him last time. In this way, it seemed that it was more difficult to touch Tang Zhenghao. This drug gang was like an iron wall. The criminal police had besieged them many times, but they had not hurt them. How could he, a businessman, touch them? Unless he also became a part of it. Li Xiqing's movement of changing clothes became slower and slower, and there were more and more thoughts in his mind. It seemed feasible. However, if Grandpa knew it, he would definitely be so angry that he would be hospitalized. But should he just sit around and wait for death? Turning on the phone, he received a call from Luo Zhan as soon as he received a signal. There is no such license plate number. The license plate number is fake. The number you saw must have been tampered with. Luo Zhan's voice was firm. Li Xiqing trusted Luo Zhan's ability very much. If he said it was fake, it must not be real. The drug gang was so cautious. No wonder the police could not catch them after so many raids. Li Xiqing narrowed his eyes and said unconsciously, "Nothing ventured, nothing gained." Hearing Li Xiqing's words, Luo Zhan suddenly felt a sense of crisis. Hey, what do you want? Nothing. You didn't sleep well last night, right? Go to bed. I will call you when I get the news. Hey, Li Xiqing, Luo Zhan said. Li Xiqing did not wait for him to finish and hung up the phone. Fastening the last cufflink, Li Xiqing put on his coat and quickly left the company. When he arrived at the old house, he saw Su Qianxi looking around at the door from a distance. Seeing his car coming back, Su Qianxi immediately ran out of the house, greeted him, and reached out to knock on the window. He coughed and looked in the rearview mirror. After making sure the bruises on his face did not look too serious, he opened the door. Zhou Chen chuckled, "Mrs. Li, he lost to someone and was beaten like this. You have to discipline him in the future. F***ck off." Li Xiqing slammed the door, and Zhou Chen laughed and went to park the car. Chapter 500. Li Xiqing also had a bruise on his waist. Being hugged by her, he felt a burning pain. However, he did not show it on his face and whispered, "The phone ran out of power and turned off." "What happened to you?" "I fell." "You fell on your face?" Su Qianxi looked at his handsome and flawless face and felt uncomfortable. She reached out and gently touched it. "Does it hurt? Let me put some ointment on it." "I've already gone to the hospital." "It doesn't matter. It's just a bruise." Su Qianxi looked at his hand. On his palm, there was almost no place that was unharmed. It was bloody, with skin peeling off, and there were small grooves made by sand. It hurt. Su Qianxi's heart ached. She pulled his sleeve and walked into the room. Li Jinan was sitting on the sofa playing with a car model. Seeing him being pulled in by Su Qianxi, he gloated and sighed. Some people just won't give up until they see the end. Su Qianxi paused, looked at Li Xiqing and said, "Where did you go?" God knew she had been worried all morning. His heart was always in his throat, as though it was being hung up to his throat. She called Luo Zhan, but he did not know anything, and Li Jinan refused to say a word. She originally thought that Li Jinan must not know, but now it was clear that they had colluded to hide it from her. "Nothing. Don't worry. I'm fine." Li Xiqing gently squeezed her palm, his voice low and slow. Su Qianxi looked up at him. After a long while, she squeezed his palm hard. The pain immediately made him gasp. "Ouch!" Su Qianxi pushed him hard, looking angry. Then she turned into the room and slammed the door. Li Xiqing was a bit dumbfounded. Seeing the blood oozing out of his palm again, he felt a little helpless. "You deserve it." Li Jinan did not have the slightest sympathy. He threw the car model away and whispered, "How is it? Go to your room and take the medicine box." Li Jinan couldn't help laughing. He picked up the medicine box and took Li Xiqing to his room. Li Jinan's room was a classic military room. The quilt was neatly folded into tofu cubes, and 2 hunting air guns were hung on the wall, crossed over each other. Further to the side were the national emblem and the national flag, followed by a large army green photo. As soon as Li Xiqing came in, he began to take off his clothes. Li Jinan took a step back and looked at him in horror. "Brother, don't mess around. Sister-in-law is still next door." Li Xiqing glanced at him coldly and threw his jacket at his face. "Close the door." Then he took off his shirt, revealing the bruises with blood oozing out. "TSK. Li Jinan furrowed his brows and took out the ointment. "What happened to you? No wonder you didn't dare to return to sister-in-law's room." Li Xiqing told her the truth. In the end, he also told her about his speculation and decision in the office. Li Jinan pressed his hand hard. Li Xiqing gasped, turned his head, and said in a low voice, "What are you doing? Are you crazy? You actually thought of doing this kind of thing? If Grandpa and Dad know, they will break your legs." Li Xiqing also knew the seriousness of the matter. He turned his head and slowly said, "I just pretended to trade with them. After all, the Li family's influence in Kingstown and the country is not weak. If..." Chapter 501. Li Xiqing was speechless. Indeed, this was not a foolproof plan. However, what should he do to protect his family? Now he could basically confirm that the people who wanted to kill Su Qianxi in the capital last time were the 2 who were driving today. Even he felt that the female voice was a bit familiar. However, he could not remember who it was. The reason why they wanted to kill Su Qianxi was very likely that Su Qianxi had seen or remembered their true faces. They thought Su Qianxi was a threat, so, however, who could it be? The capital. Kingstown. Li Xiqing immediately thought of someone. He picked up his phone and dialed Rong Haiyue's number. After the phone rang a dozen times, it was picked up. There was a very loud and neat slogan on Rong Haiyue's phone, as well as the sound of soldiers marching. Li Xiqing? Listening to the voice, it seemed that he was a bit surprised. "Yes, Mr. Rong." Rong Haiyue heard this title, his eyes became a bit dim, but he quickly smiled again. "What's the matter? Are you in the capital?" "Yes, watching the training of the new recruits." "Excuse me, where is your daughter now? Isn't she with you?" Rong Haiyue said subconsciously, but quickly reacted. "You mean Anna?" "Yes. She went on a tour with Bo Xiao in the UK these days, and it will be more than a week before she comes back." "Tour?" "Yes, she and Bo Xiao are both music students. They formed a band, which is quite famous. Now, they are on a business trip again." "When did they go?" "The afternoon flight the day before yesterday, about 5 or 6 p.m. "Why do you ask?" "Remember the last time we went to the capital, we met in the hotel? How could he forget? Rong Haiyue's eyes were sharp and he asked, do you suspect Anna? Still investigating, but this possibility is not ruled out. Impossible, she did not move. He originally wanted to say that she had no motive, but after all, she was his daughter, and he knew Rong Anna very well. If she knew that Su Qianxi was Rong Haiyue's daughter, she might really be hostile, but this hostility would certainly not constitute killing intent. Rong Haiyue hesitated and said, she did not know that Su Qianxi was my daughter. I did not tell her. That's not the only reason, Li Xiqing interrupted him, not planning to explain. Now I have no evidence, but for Qianxi's safety, I hope you can keep it a secret and not tell your other daughter about my suspicions. Of course. I'm going to Kingstown next week. We can talk face to face then. Sure, see you then. Goodbye. Hanging up the phone, Li Xiqing subconsciously thought of Bo Xiao, whom he had met at the Rong family's door. They were both tall, but dressed in different styles. Especially last time, Su Qianxi looked at Bo Xiao a little too much, and she was attacked that afternoon. There were many things that couldn't be linked together, but once they were put together, they became very clear. Li Xiqing became more and more suspicious of Rong Anna and Bo Xiao, but where was the evidence? Without evidence, everything was just empty talk. Li Jinnan's gaze on Li Xiqing became deeper and deeper. In the end, there was even a hint of viciousness. Chapter 502. Li Xiqing's eyes gradually calmed down. He put on his clothes, opened the door, and went back to his room. As soon as he entered, he saw a small bump on the bed. He went forward and gently lifted the quilt. At a glance, he saw Su Qianxi's small head with messy hair. Su Qianxi opened her eyes, which were red and a bit wet. He reached out and lifted her up, whispering, "What's wrong?" Su Qianxi ignored him, slapped his hand away, turned around, and continued to lie down. He took off his shoes, got in, and pretended to be confused. "Is there a treasure under the quilt, huh?" Suddenly, he climbed onto her body and looked at her face. His tone was pleasantly surprised as he said, "There's really a treasure." "What a beautiful treasure." Su Qianxi smiled, but deliberately kept a straight face. She reached out and pushed him away, saying, "Go away. I still want to see the treasure." "I won't go." He deliberately shrank in her direction and reached out to hold her firmly. Su Qianxi twisted her body, turned around, and reached out to untie his clothes. Li Xiqing froze, held her hand, and said, "I haven't taken a shower yet." Su Qianxi did not care. After breaking away from his hand, she untied his coat. He could not win against her, so he simply lay flat and held her in his arms, whispering, "Sleep, okay?" "I didn't sleep all night." "Let me see." Su Qianxi's voice was a bit choked. "How badly are you hurt? Why don't you dare to show me?" Li Xiqing heard that and knew that he could not hide it anymore. He whispered, "It's just a scratch." "It's okay. Get up, let me see." He still could not win against her. He could not bear to see her cry, so he had to sit up and take off his clothes. Su Qianxi saw red abrasions on his body, some of which were a little red and swollen, but fortunately, they were not serious. Finally relieved, she reached out and pressed on one of his skin. Li Xiqing frowned and looked at her without resistance. "You deserve it," she said, and then reached out and pressed him down. "Don't take a shower. It's just been applied. Go to sleep." Being seen through, Li Xiqing was no longer afraid. He took her in his arms and kissed her. Su Qianxi was kissed suddenly, but she had long been used to his surprise. Putting her arms around his neck, she responded awkwardly. Li Xiqing was a bit surprised by her response. The kiss deepened, and the tip of his tongue hooked her lips. Gradually, his lips moved down to her chin, her neck, and her collarbone. He was like a devout believer that was prostrating himself in worship of his most loyal faith. Su Qianxi's heart fluttered, and her breathing became more rapid. She reached out and pushed him. There's no injury there. Li Xiqing's lips were against her skin, his voice a bit muffled. We can continue. Pervert. She blushed. Li Xiqing pushed her blouse up and pressed it against her body, whispering seductively, I am a pervert who only has feelings for you. She held his neck tighter, trembling so hard that even her toes curled up. Finally, it's been more than 3 months. I've endured so much. Ah. Don't bite there. It's uncomfortable, coming. Dash. Chapter 503. Coming. Li Xiqing had never restrained himself like today, being careful not to hurt her and the baby. However, after all, he had been a vegetarian for many days. When the feeling came, he had no time to care about the pain in his hands and fell on the bed with her. From the beginning to the end, he did not touch her belly. The belly of the 3-month-old fetus was already bulging, bigger than that of a mother with a single child. Li Xiqing looked at the belly and couldn't help but reach out and touch it. Do you think it's possible that it's a boy and a girl in your belly? I don't know. Su Qianxi saw his infatuated expression and smiled. It will take 4 months to find out, and the doctor will not tell the gender, for fear that you will value boys more than girls. Li Xiqing looked at her belly, left and right, up and down, and couldn't help smiling. Finally, he directly lay down next to her, held her in his arms, and whispered, I hope it's a boy and a girl. If not, 2 girls will do. Did boys offend you? Boys are hard to take care of. I heard that my mother raised us 3 brothers, and she was furious. The 3 brothers were all mischievous. Among them, Li Xiqing was the most rebellious, followed by Li Jinnan. Although Li Beixing looked obedient on the surface, he was actually full of evil tricks, even worse than Li Xiqing and Li Jinnan. If his wife raised 2 boys, and the 2 boys were like them, it would be terrible. If it's really 2 boys, can you still abort it? Su Qianxi pinched his nose. It's the same whether it's a boy or a girl. When Li Xiqing was about to say something, Su Qianxi pinched his mouth and looked dignified. Now, sleep. Yes, sleep. He had not slept all night, and he had been tense all the time. He was already exhausted. He fell asleep comfortably with his wife in his arms. When he woke up, Su Qianxi was nowhere to be seen. Glancing at the small alarm clock on the bedside table, he realized that he had slept until 8:00 in the evening. Li Xiqing patted his head, picked up the phone on the bed, and saw that there were dozens of missed calls. As soon as he picked it up, Qing Yu's phone was connected. Boss. Yeah. Li Xiqing responded and stretched his waist. However, it pulled at the wound on his body, and the pain made him put his hand back. Tang Menjing ran away. At 3 in the afternoon, she injured a nurse and ran out disguised as one. Hearing that, Li Xiqing's eyes, which were still in a trance, suddenly focused and turned into a beam of sharp and clear light. Didn't I tell you to strengthen the defense? Yes, it's reinforced, but, did you catch him? He ran away. There's someone waiting for him outside. He went straight into the car, Shirti. Qingyu did not dare to speak. He seemed to have calmed down and asked, where is Rongrui? Rongrui? Why did she suddenly mention Rongrui? It's best if this has nothing to do with him. Otherwise, he would not care about his relationship with Qingyu. Qingyu knew how serious it was. She was shocked and immediately said, no, Rongrui has already broken up with her. It can't be him. Chapter 504. Qingyu suddenly felt uncomfortable. She had worked so hard for 3 years to get this position. She did not know how many corpses she had stepped on. As soon as Rongrui came over, his salary was the same as hers? No. This was too unfair. Qingyu coughed. This is not in line with the rules, right? Li Xiqing seemed to see what she was thinking and said, I'll double your year-end bonus. Yes, boss. I will complete the task. Well, thank you. For the next week, Li Xiqing was very busy. First, it was a cooperation project between the Li Group and Australia. Second, the acquisition of the Tang Group had not been completed. In addition, Tang Zhenghao had not been found and caught, which was undoubtedly a big stone in Li Xiqing's heart. However, it was worth rejoicing that in just 9 days, 2 drug gang transactions were cracked. The value of each case was as high as millions. The combined value of the 2 cases was as high as tens of millions. In the past 2 years, the cooperation between the Li Group and the police had become closer. Weibo and the news had reported it, and the stock of the Li Group continued to rise and appreciate in this short period of time. However, seeing the Li Group becoming more and more famous, Su Qianxi's worry did not decrease but increased. Today was the day of the prenatal checkup. Li Xiqing got up early and went to the study to deal with some affairs. Then at about 9 o'clock, he got up and went back to the room. He thought it would take a lot of effort to wake Su Qianxi up. Unexpectedly, when he returned to the room, Su Qianxi had already gone into the bathroom to freshen up. Looking for clothes in the closet, when Su Qianxi came out, it was already 2 minutes later. Her belly had begun to show. Su Qianxi's 4-month-old belly looked bigger than the average 4-month-old mother. Li Xiqing looked at the belly and couldn't help smiling. He went forward to hold her, his voice low, mellow, and gentle. So early today? Su Qianxi puffed her cheeks and said, "Help me change. It's time for the prenatal checkup." "Well, wear a skirt. This one is loose and looks good." Li Xiqing picked up a spring floral skirt. "Raise your hand." Su Qianxi obediently raised her hand and looked at him with a pair of big almond-shaped eyes, blinking. Obviously, she had something to say. He pretended not to notice and focused on helping her put on her clothes. Finally, he zipped her up and said, "Done." "Hubby." "Yes?" Li Xiqing took the jacket next to him and put it on her, casually responding. "Don't you think the Li Corporation is too high profile now? It was right to assist the police in fighting criminal gangs, but now that everyone knew that the Li Corporation worked closely with the police, wouldn't it be too eye-catching? The criminal gangs will definitely target us and take revenge on us. As the saying goes, the bird that sticks out gets shot." Recently, the Li Group had been in the limelight so much that she was worried. Chapter 505. Su Qianxi blinked and did not understand what he meant. "I have ruined the Tang family, and Tang Zhenghao will never let it go. Besides, even without Tang Zhenghao's participation, the drug gang has already targeted us." His voice paused, and his eyes flashed a few rays of light. "Or, they are targeting you. Do you remember the gunshot attack in the capital last time?" Su Qianxi's eyes narrowed slightly, looking at Li Xiqing. Unexpectedly calm, she asked, "Are they in the same group?" "Yes," Li Xiqing nodded. "Be careful of Bo Xiao and Rong Anna. I suspect that the man who took you hostage last time was Bo Xiao." Su Qianxi heard that, and there was no surprise on her face. Obviously, she had already thought of this possibility. Li Xiqing reached out and pulled her into his arms, whispering, "You also guessed it?" "Yes, I thought about this possibility. They were afraid that I would recognize them, so when I was in the capital, they wanted to kill me." Li Xiqing's eyes had a few glimmers of appreciation. He nodded and said, "Later, I sent someone to investigate them and even followed them for a period of time, but they were very cautious, always appearing and disappearing mysteriously, and often went in and out of the deep alleys, shaking off our people. Until now, no evidence has been found. The enemy is in the dark, and we are in the light. This gang can fight with the police for so long and still be safe. They are definitely not weak. Instead of waiting for death, it is better to take the initiative to show our attitude. We are a private company. Shaping the image of the Li family is not only good for the reputation of the Li family, but also the higher our image in the minds of the netizens and citizens, the more attention the government will pay. In addition, with the identity of grandpa, dad, and brother, no matter how bold the gang is, they will not dare to attack us easily. On the contrary, they will be very afraid. Li Xiqing was very confident. His eyes were sparkling, and his handsome face was full of the glow of victory. I see. Su Qianxi was a little dazed, but she roughly understood the meaning. Li Xiqing smiled, reached out and touched her hair, and said, "You don't need to understand. You just need to know that every decision I make will ensure that you and your family will be protected." He was waiting. When Tang Zhenghao couldn't help but make a move, when he couldn't help but expose himself in front of everyone's eyes, then they would take the opportunity to catch him in one fell swoop. Tang Zhenghao, Rong Anna, or Bo Shao, as long as one of these three people fell into the hands of him or the police, then he would have a breakthrough. At that time, they could be completely solved, and Li Xiqing could really rest assured. Su Qianxi heard Li Xiqing's words and looked up at his face. Noticing that she looked up, Li Xiqing looked down and saw her big round eyes blinking. She asked, "What about you?" Her voice was soft, and he reached out to hold her hand. Curling his lips, he said in a deep voice, "I will be fine, too. I was scared to death when I couldn't find you last time. I thought something had happened to you." Chapter 506. As he spoke, his gaze became obscure and his lips curled into a mischievous smile. He kissed the corner of her lips and said in a low voice, "You can punish me however you want." Su Qianxi blushed and reached out to pat him. "You wish." Li Xiqing caught her hand and teased, "So there's no need for punishment?" "Pfft, if there is a next time, I will punish you to sleep on the floor and not on my bed." "That's too cruel." Li Xiqing frowned, looking like he had suffered a lot. "It's that serious?" Su Qianxi smiled, feeling a bit proud. Hugging his neck, she kissed him on the lips and said, "So you have to be careful in the future. Don't act on your own. Remember to report to me before you act, so that I don't worry about you for nothing." "Yes, ma'am." His voice was low and soft, with a smile on his lips. His eyes were full of love. Su Qianxi's heart was about to melt. Blushing, she looked away and pretended to be calm. "Now, go to the hospital for a prenatal checkup." He held her hand and put his other hand around her waist, saying softly, "Yes, ma'am." "Humph, don't think that I will be lenient next time." "You wish." At the hospital, after all the tests were done, an old doctor adjusted his glasses and told them that there were 2 placentas and 2 fetal hearts in the uterus of the pregnant woman. In other words, they were fraternal twins. Although he had already known that there were 2 children, hearing the news, Li Xiqing was still dazed. In a pair of cold and dark eyes, there was a little surprise and astonishment. His face, which had been calm since he entered the hospital, slowly became full of surprise. Fraternal twins, 2 fetal hearts, 2 placentas. Li Xiqing repeated this sentence, his heart racing. An indescribable emotion suddenly appeared from the deepest part of his body. 2 children? Fraternal twins? Repeating it again, Li Xiqing's eyes were as dark as the night sky, and at this moment, they were even more profound and bright. Did I hear it right? Su Qianxi looked into his eyes, which were even more dazzling at this moment. Curling her lips, she nodded in confirmation. Li Xiqing got the confirmation, and his eyes became even more misty. He suddenly laughed, reached out, and pulled her into his arms. His arms tightened as he hugged her. He deliberately lowered his voice and said, "Amazing, my wife is amazing." Su Qianxi reached out and touched his trembling hand, chuckling. Facing the teasing eyes of the doctors, she whispered with a blush, "So many people are watching. Be normal." "Yes." He responded loudly, unable to contain his joy. He let go of her and kissed her on the cheek. The smile on his face seemed to be trying hard to be contained, but it unconsciously became wider and wider. His uncontrollable laughter was low and moving. It was the first time that Su Qianxi had seen Li Xiqing like this. He could not hide his joy, and he could not control his emotions. He was really, like a fool. She couldn't help pursing her lips and looking at him with a blush. Li Xiqing's eyes were shining. He looked down at her lower abdomen, gently stroking it with his big palm. She did not know whether he was talking to her or whispering to her stomach, "Wait for me." Then he strode out of the clinic. "Where are you going?" "To make a call." Dash. Chapter 507. The phone rang a dozen times, but no one answered. Just when it was about to hang up automatically, the phone vibrated slightly. There was a rustling sound and heavy breathing. Oh Ming's voice came quickly. "Li Xiqing?" His voice seemed to be in a trance and drunk. Li Xiqing frowned, swallowed the good news that was about to come out of his mouth, and asked, "What are you doing?" "Li Xiqing, Li Xiqing." Oh Ming's voice was heavy, and vaguely, there was a bit of a crying tone. "Li Xiqing, I..." He did not say it, but actually whimpered. Li Xiqing was shocked. His soft face suddenly tightened, and his cold temperament was revealed in an instant. He calmly said, "Where are you?" The first sentence was not to ask what happened, not to ask what was wrong, but to ask where he was. Oh Ming's throat was even more choked, but he could not speak. However, the sad voice belonged to a man, which was particularly shocking. Li Xiqing's face tightened, and he walked in without saying a word. Shuangyu, who was tall and straight, stood next to Su Qianxi. Seeing Li Xiqing coming over, she nodded to him. The doctor was telling Su Qianxi some things to pay attention to. Su Qianxi's face was full of the glory of maternal love, listening patiently. Oh Ming's voice gradually became smaller, and he said, "I am in the villa on Xishan." The villa on Xishan, where Oh Ming kept Yu Lily. Li Xiqing's eyes were covered with a layer of haze. Oh Ming's appearance must have something to do with Yu Lily. But to be able to force Oh Ming like this, Yu Lily's ability was much greater than he thought. Li Xiqing did not ask much and said, "I will be there soon." Then he hung up the phone. Su Qianxi looked over and found that Li Xiqing's mood suddenly became a lot worse. She was shocked, and the doctor happened to be at the end of the story. After a few words, Su Qianxi agreed and went forward to hold Li Xiqing's hand. She whispered, "What's wrong?" "Something happened to Oh Ming. I have to go and see." Li Xiqing's voice was very soft, but his mood was definitely not relaxed. "I will send you back first." "No, you go ahead. Shuangyu and Ada are there." Shuangyu always followed Su Qianxi and did not move half a step away. "I'll take you back first," Li Xiqing insisted. After sending her to the car, he asked Ada to drive back to the old house. Along the way, Li Xiqing was a little absent-minded. She reached out and touched his hand, whispering, "What's wrong with Oh Ming?" Li Xiqing shook his head. "I don't know, but I've never seen him like that." "What did it look like?" Su Qianxi was very curious, but seeing Li Xiqing's pursed lips, she did not ask more. When they arrived at the old house, Shuangyu and Su Qianxi got out of the car together. Just as he was about to follow, Su Qianxi pushed him in. "You go find Oh Ming. I'm already home. You don't have to send me." For Li Xiqing, Oh Ming and Luo Zhan were the closest people to him besides his family, especially Oh Ming. Although they were not brothers, they were more like brothers. For someone as powerful as Oh Ming to make Li Xiqing so worried, it must not be a small matter. Li Xiqing was pushed back, nodded, and looked at Shuangyu. "Take care of her." Chapter 508. In the luxuriously decorated European-style room, the complicated classical curtains blocked all the light. The light in the room was dim, and there were bottles of wine lying on the floor beside the man in a disorderly manner. On the big bed in the middle of the room, a large amount of blood was shocking. The whole room was filled with the smell of alcohol and blood, which was disgusting. Oh Ming leaned against the edge of the bed, still holding a bottle of red wine in his hand. His thin beige shirt was stained with blood. His eyes were hazy from drunkenness, and he could clearly see the tall and straight figure in front of him. You are here. Oh Ming chuckled, but tears rolled down in an instant. Lao air, huh? Li Xiqing could never have imagined that he would see such a scene. Bloody, hideous, and embarrassed. At that moment, Oh Ming didn't have any of his usual high spirits. This was clearly a toad in dire straits. His first reaction was to check Oh Ming. Are you hurt? Li Xiqing pulled his clothes and found that his muscles were very smooth. There was no trace of blood at all. Oh Ming pushed him away and said, "It's not me, it's you. This blood is from you." Li Xiqing was shocked, but his heart was instantly relieved. A pair of dark eyes looked at him, unspeakably cold, and asked word by word, "She is dead? You killed her?" With so much blood, even if she was not dead, she had lost half of her life. However, how could Oh Ming bear it? He liked Yu Lily so much. Oh Ming's eyelids were half open, and he took a long breath and smiled. That blood is my child. My child is gone, and I lost it. What do you mean? Li Xiqing looked at him, took his bottle away, and threw it aside. That woman is pregnant? Now, she has a miscarriage? She wanted to break up with me. She took all the money. All the money she took from me all these years, she actually recorded it all. She threw the account book to me and said that she would pay me back what she owed me. Pfft. Oh Ming closed his eyes heavily, and tears streamed down his cheeks. Then, you hit her? Ha, hit her? How can I bear to? Oh Ming reached out to touch the wine bottle, his hands shaking terribly. Li Xiqing quickly grabbed his hand and looked at him coldly. Then why is there so much blood? There's so much blood. Can the child survive? Oh Ming's hands trembled even more. Looking at Li Xiqing, he held his head and shook his head hard. I didn't know she was pregnant. If I had known, would not have treated her like that. I didn't mean it, but, you, put her on the bed? Was that why there was so much blood on the bed? Oh Ming didn't say anything. He just stared at him. Such an attitude was tantamount to tacit approval. You. Li Xiqing suddenly found that he did not know what to say. He wanted to scold him, but seeing him like this, he could not say anything. Where are they now? Chapter 509. I've told you long ago that this woman is an ungrateful wretch. How many times have I advised you not to provoke her? You. Li Xiqing looked away irritably. Where is she now? Hospital. She doesn't want to see me. She hates me. What should I do? She wanted to break up with me. After this incident, I can no longer keep her, Xiqing. Li Xiqing was silent for a moment before saying, Now, change your clothes and go to the hospital to accompany her. She doesn't want to see me, you have to look even if you don't want to. You are the father of the child. You have the right to take care of her. It's her business that she hates you, but you have to do your duty. Oh Ming, get up. Li Xiqing roughly lifted him up. He was a man of about 6 feet tall. Seeing the large bloodstain on the bed, Oh Ming looked away and then went to the cloakroom to get his clothes. Xiqing was right. It was her business that she hated him, but he must do his duty. Oh Ming wiped his face with a wet tissue, looked at himself in the mirror, and suddenly grinned. Every time, when he was helpless, Xiqing could always say something inexplicably encouraging. How could Oh Ming have such a good friend and brother? No matter what happened in the future, he would recognize this brother for a lifetime. Oh Ming thought silently while unbuttoning his shirt. However, just before he finished, he heard Li Xiqing's cell phone ring. Li Xiqing picked up the phone and saw it was Li Jinnan. There was heavy breathing over the phone, and Li Jinnan's voice was a little anxious. At the same time, there was the sound of a sports car engine starting. Brother, sister-in-law has been kidnapped. Come back. Li Xiqing's heart skipped a beat. Shocked, he immediately rushed out of the door and ran out. Oh Ming was startled by his sudden movement. "Where are you going?" There was no response. Su Qianxi watched the Bugatti leave and then went inside with Shuangyu. However, suddenly, Shuangyu's eyes narrowed. She looked alert and directly punched in the direction of Su Qianxi. Su Qianxi was shocked and exclaimed. Then she heard a muffled sound behind her. A short man was punched down by Shuangyu, and Su Qianxi looked over in shock. Shuangyu subdued the short man, but when she looked up, her face changed, and she roared. The two bodyguards guarding the door heard the commotion and immediately came to help. Su Qianxi was shocked and was about to look back, but then her hand was suddenly caught. A strong arm wrapped around her neck, and a cold touch was pressed against her neck. "Come here and I'll kill her." The voice was cold and harsh. It sounded rough and familiar. Tang Zhenghao. Su Qianxi stiffened her neck and did not dare to move. However, her body could not stop trembling, her breathing was rapid, and her heart was racing. Shuangyu and the two bodyguards immediately stopped their movements and looked at the 5 men walking forward behind Tang Zhenghao. Each of them was holding a long steel pipe, and their faces changed dramatically. At this time, Su Qianxi calmed down and said, "Don't be impulsive. If anything happens to me, he will not let you go." Tang Zhenghao grinned and ignored her. Looking at the bodyguards, he said, "Such obedient dogs. Tell Li Xiqing to come to the abandoned warehouse in the eastern suburbs alone. If there are too many people, there will be consequences." Chapter 5:10. Shuangyu was so anxious that she almost cried. She immediately ran toward the door of the Li family, banging on the door and ringing the doorbell. Li Jinan was just about to go out, shaking the car key in his hand. As soon as he opened the door, he saw Shuangyu's appearance and raised an eyebrow. "What's wrong?" Shuangyu could not say a word. She hurriedly gestured and pointed to the direction of Tang Zhenghao's car. Li Jinan looked at her gesticulating and thought it was fun. He crossed his arms and laughed with great interest, even though he didn't understand a word of what she was saying. Shuangyu was so anxious that she stamped her feet and made a phone gesture to him. Li Jinan handed the phone to her, and Shuangyu's fingers quickly typed, "My wife was kidnapped." Li Jinan was shocked, and his face suddenly changed. Then Shuangyu typed, "Let Mr. Li go to the abandoned warehouse in the eastern suburbs alone, or he will bear the consequences." Bastard. Li Jinan immediately snatched the phone back and rushed out to drive. Shuangyu also followed, pointing to herself to indicate that she could help. Li Jinan opened the door of the passenger seat. After she got in the car, the yellow Porsche suddenly rushed forward and rushed in the direction that Shuangyu pointed. Su Qianxi was taken into the car. Feeling the knife on her neck, her heart was beating so fast that it almost jumped out. But despite the fear in her heart, Su Qianxi was unexpectedly calm. Tang Zhenghao finally let go. Su Qianxi looked at Tang Zhenghao sitting on the side, shrinking to the corner, hands twisted together, and asked calmly, "What do you want to do?" Tang Zhenghao glanced at her and sneered. "Don't worry, I will not punish you. I will give you to Tang Menjing later and let her play with you." "Ha! Happy?" Su Qianxi's heart skipped a beat, and her back was against the door. Thinking of Tang Menjing's hysterical and crazy posture in the hospital, she couldn't help but feel scared. That woman's mind had long been abnormal. Even her own child could fall like that. After being sentenced to imprisonment, she was transferred to a mental hospital. Now, what would she do with her? Su Qianxi's heart was shocked and unconsciously trembled. Tang Zhenghao looked at her. She was obviously scared to death, but she pretended to be calm and acted as if nothing had happened. He only wanted to laugh in his heart. The car drove steadily in the direction of the eastern suburbs, but suddenly, Tang Zhenghao saw a yellow Porsche speeding up behind them, and the person sitting in the driver's seat was the third child of the Li family, Li Jinan. Tisk, tsk, tsk. The children of the Li family are all good, but why are they so impulsive? Tang Zhenghao looked regretful. I've already said that only Li Xiqing is allowed to come. What is Li Jinan doing here? Tell me, aren't they forcing me to kill the hostages? Huh? As Tang Zhenghao spoke, he waved the sharp dagger in his hand in front of Su Qianxi. Su Qianxi shivered and leaned against the door. Her heart was beating so fast that she could not feel it. Biting her lower lip, Su Qianxi's eyes were slightly red, but she clung to the door and did not dare to move. Ha 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 ha. Tang Zhenghao laughed happily, took back the dagger and said, I'm just scaring you. I still need Li Xiqing to do things for me. If I kill you, won't that guy kill me? You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.